Kohberger allegedly stalked one of the victims. That's false. You knew that was false. For anybody who had never heard that before, that question is now planted into them, unqualified representation that Mr. Kohberger stalked one of the witnesses, and that's false.
We do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area. There are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants.
Everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged.
Good evening. Unexpected to say the least. I was not expecting them to release the autopsy reports anytime soon. Especially with what we just went over with the WSU and the lawsuit with the families. I don't know if there's been an answer to the new protective order that was filed. I haven't checked. I'm really surprised that they dropped these autopsy reports. And I can tell from the chat that some of you guys have already gone in and started reading this stuff. I have no idea what it says. I had to get dinner done. I had to get some other things taken care of in the house with the kids, get stuff situated. I have no idea what these say. So we're going to be reading them together. I also know that Chris Holland is over on Custody Queens right now. I do not know if that is still happening. I started recording it, I don't know, 35 or 40 minutes ago or so that I could have, I don't know if they ever go back in and delete anything in the analytics. So when stuff is live, I always go in and try to screen record it as it's live so that it's in its pure form so that I can go back and listen to all of it. So I've only heard like bits and pieces of what he's said because I've been going back and forth and doing things. So I don't know if that's still happening, but I'll do a reaction of this interview maybe tomorrow, I guess. Chris Holland is the other guy that was helping Chris Whitcomb with the book. So, like, again, I've heard like bits and pieces, but I'll just hold off on saying anything until I've actually got to sit down and actually pay attention to it. And then we'll go over it. Yeah, autopsy reports. Also, some other very interesting information that we're going to have to be careful going over. So let me show you guys the folder where I have all of these. Well, first I'll show you the page where I have all of, well, the page itself. Okay, so this is the Idaho Case of Interest website where all of these are. That's open to the public, but because I know that some of you guys can't access these, I've also taken them and put them over here on the share drive. Now, when you go to open this, you're going to see this right here for the autopsy report itself. It's a big file, so it's going to tell you that you have to download it, that you can't see. It's going to tell you that you have to download it, that you can't do a preview like you can with the smaller ones. See how this one like instantly opens up? It's just because it's so big. So if you want to see it without downloading it, then you can go here to the Idaho Case of Interest website. I'll go ahead and drop this link for right here to the page itself. And then I've also taken them and printed them out separately, Ethan's, Kaylee's, Maddie's, and Xana's. So let me actually click over here and give you all the links because sometimes it pops up the email things and I don't want it doing that. Okay. So these are going to be open. I should not have to. That was Ethan's. I should not have to approve these so that you guys can follow along. This one is Kaylee. And I put these in there earlier, but I know that sometimes you can't scroll up all the way. And then this is Maddie. And then this is Xana's. Okay, so now y'all got the links for these. Now, I will just say again, there is a whole lot of other information that came out today. There is some information in here that I'm going to have to be very careful how I go over because it's almost doxing level information, as in some of the family members from the, I guess, death penalty phase where they were going to have to go back like 3 generations, a lot of stuff about his sisters, their high schools, their places of employment. Like it's all on this ginormous ass list. So while the document itself is in its pure form on the Google Drive because it's a public document, here when we go over that information, I'm going to just give you guys the names of like the person, and all of the other information I'm going to redact out. I'm not going to have any of the high school names or colleges or places that they work or anything like that on there because I don't know why the hell they even have that in there. I'm fine going over the names, but we're not going to go over all that other info. So when we go over that one, it will be redacted. It will be redacted. There's also lists from some amended reports from Lawrence Mowry that we're going to go over. Not tonight. Tonight's just for the autopsies, but this is just like stuff. There's been quite a lot of stuff happening. Like over the past few weeks, there's been like non-stop stuff happening. Lots of important information in the last doc drop. Hella important information in this one. And again, we were going to just do like a whole like go through of all of it the way that we did with the last drop of info. But then I noticed the autopsy reports and I said, no, we really need to focus on these. So what I'll also probably end up doing is separating these out for each of the victims and attaching the document to it separately, like eventually after we're done with this whole thing. But we're going to go over all 4. We're going to go over all 4. Let me see. Oh my gosh, there's like all kinds of stuff already. Thank you for the 5 gifted memberships, Bianca. I appreciate that. And you joined yourself. Thank you so much. Hey there, Tara. Thank you for being a member for 2 months. I appreciate that. 10 gifted memberships from Miller Time and from Tara and from Lady Di. Congratulations to those who got those. I appreciate that, you guys. Thank you so much. Welcome, Sharon. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And thank you for the 1999 Chiefs. How you doing? It's been a minute since I've seen you. How are you? All right, you guys. You ready to start reading this stuff? This is going to be like a lot. Let me put a little warning on here. Warning. Graphic content. Autopsy report of the 122 King Road homicide victims. Okay. No, it needs to show. Okay. Okay. Oh, thank you, Bad Mom Bree. 5 more gifted memberships. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, you guys. We're going to start reading this now. This should be where you guys can see everything. So we're going to go through like the whole thing. Like it starts down here with the actual like reports, but I wanted to read the opinion that's placed on here first, because so her like, what do they call it, curriculum vitae, sort of like a resume for your career, that's at the bottom of this. This is completely different. Thank you for the $4.99, Lady Di. For everyone asking, the stomach contents are mentioned under alimentary tract. Okay. Alrighty. So this is from Veena Singh. This is the medical examiner that conducted the autopsies over in Spokane on the 16th, the same day that the first press conference was done. The state has disclosed Veena Singh, Spokane County Chief Medical Examiner and Forensic Pathologist, in this supplemental discovery response. It is anticipated that the state will call Dr. Singh to testify as an expert regarding the autopsies performed at Spokane County Medical Examiner's Office on November 16, 2022 on the following individuals: Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Maddie Mogen. This response, actually, let me stop for a second. I'm really wondering why they're in this order. Because remember how the first responding officer, Nunes, when he took notes, he had it right, with Xana being in the same room as Ethan and Kaylee being with Maddie. But when the idiot went to go write the damn first search warrant, as we can see now that we have his handwritten notes and we can see he had it correctly and did not check them, if he would have checked his notes, it wouldn't have been wrong in the search warrant and it wouldn't have been wrong in his report. Notice that they have Kaylee's name next to Ethan. It's also like that, and the way that I have it in here with Kaylee being next to Ethan's is because in here, after Ethan's report is Kaylee's. But we were told that they were taken out like per room, right? So when we see Ethan being taken out, it should also be Xana being taken out with him. So we were told that the autopsies were done in a way that the bodies were removed in that order. So is this something else that we're seeing that is a discrepancy based off of the first responders' search warrant being written incorrectly? Because in the spatter report where Paula Sutton put in like her notes on the autopsy stuff, everyone's in order correctly. It's Ethan and then Xana and then Maddie and then Kaylee. Like they're in the right order. But I noticed the order was off here. It's just something I noticed. Okay. Ethan, Kaylee, Xana, and Maddie. This response serves to supplement the information in the autopsy reports for Ethan, Kaylee, Xana, and Madison, attached as exhibits S-1A through D, photographs and/or video, and related reports as previously discovered to defense. The below is a summary of Dr. Singh's anticipated testimony, but does not repeat all specific findings that are detailed in her reports. Based on Dr. Singh's education, training, and experience as a chief medical examiner and a forensic pathologist, Dr. Singh will testify to performing post-mortem examinations on Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Maddie Mogen. It is expected Dr. Singh will testify that Kaylee, Xana, and Madison endured a high degree of pain and or suffering prior to their deaths as a result of all the injuries inflicted. It is expected Dr. Singh will testify Ethan Chapin also experienced a high degree of pain and or suffering prior to his death as a result of the injuries inflicted, but to a lesser degree than the other decedents. Okay. Dr. Singh will testify regarding chain of custody, observations, examinations, evidence collected, tests performed, and cause of death. It is Dr. Singh's expert opinion that Ethan Chapin's cause of death is multiple sharp force injuries. Dr. Singh's post-mortem examination showed a well-developed adult male with stab and incised wounds of the scalp, face, and neck, a stab wound of the upper chest, incised wounds of the upper extremities, stab and incised wounds of the lower extremities, associated injuries to include perforations of the jugular vein, subclavian vein, and subclavian artery. Dr. Singh will testify there was no evidence of natural disease that would have contributed to Chapin's death. Postmortem toxicology showed Chapin had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.122 grams per 100 milliliters and an amphetamine level of 260 nanograms per milliliter. We've gone through all of those measurements. We've done all of that already. In addition, Dr. Singh will provide testimony regarding evidence that the knife used on Chapin showed indications that there was a blade guard. What does that mean? What do you mean? That he was cut with a knife that had a guard on the blade? Knife with blade guard. What the frick does that mean? Dr. Singh will provide her opinions that Chapin's wounds are consistent with a single-edged knife as the source of the wounds. She says here that it seems as if a K-bar full-size U.S. Marine Corps fighting knife is consistent with the injuries observed. Okay, so, like, are they literally trying to say that they think that he was stabbed while the knife had a guard on it? Guard between the knife and the handle. Oh, y'all are saying the word hilts. Okay. Knife hilts. Oh, okay. So something that like actually stops the blade. Okay. I think I get it. Like a K-bar does. Okay. 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 I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. Okay. Okay. Now we're moving on to Kaylee. It is Dr. Singh's expert opinion that Kaylee Goncalves. Actually, let's stop for a second. This is going to be the first time I think that we've seen them have a document that states a K-bar knife is consistent with the injuries observed. Because we've been questioning that. We've been wanting that for a while. They've never really come out and said it. Law enforcement's never really come out and just straight up said it. That was basically being based on the fact that there was a sheath found. So I think this is going to be the first time that we've actually seen them state Dr. Singh will provide her opinion that the use of a K-bar full-size U.S. Marine Corps fighting knife is consistent with the injuries observed. Okay. It is Dr. Singh's expert opinion that Kaylee Goncalves' cause of death is multiple sharp force injuries. In addition, blunt force injuries of the head and asphyxial injuries are a significant contributor to her death. Dr. Singh's postmortem examination showed a well-developed adult female with stab and incise wounds of the scalp, face, neck, stab and incise wounds of the chest, and stab and incised wounds of the upper extremities. Associated injuries include punctures of the outer table of the skull. My dogs are going to freak out because the Walmart order just got here. So y'all are going to hear them bark for a second. Can y'all hear them? They're a little crazy. Okay. Okay. Associated injuries include punctures of the outer table of the skull, injuries to the teeth and tongue, perforations of the subclavian artery and vein, and hemorrhage into the chest cavities. Dr. Singh observed blunt force injuries, including scalp laceration, bleeding around the brain, and nasal fracture, as well as scrapes on the nose and cheeks, bruising around the eyes, and patterned bruises extending across the lower face. Dr. Singh will testify that an unidentified object was pressed across Goncalves' mouth. So that's where Steve got that from. That's where they got that from. Dr. Singh observed petechial hemorrhages in the eyes and mouth. Dr. Singh will testify there was no evidence of natural disease that would have caused or contributed to Goncalves' death. Postmortem toxicology showed Goncalves had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.107. Dr. Singh will provide her opinion that Goncalves' wounds are consistent with a single-edged or double-edged knife being the source of the wounds. Dr. Singh will provide her opinion that the use of a K-bar fighting knife is consistent with the injuries observed. Can you really say that if you're saying that a double-edged knife could also be the source? I don't think so. Right? Gotta tell my kid to get the groceries in. Like, I don't think you can say that and say that at the same time. That's a little inconsistent. It is Dr. Singh's expert opinion that Xana Kernodle's cause of death is multiple sharp force injuries. Dr. Singh's postmortem examination showed a well-developed adult female with stab and incised wounds of the scalp, face, and neck, stab wounds of the chest and abdomen, incised puncture wounds of the back, incised wounds of the upper extremities, and incised wounds of the lower extremities. Dr. Singh also observed associated injuries, including punctures of the outer table of the skull, perforations of the jugular vein, heart, lung, and pulmonary blood vessels, hemorrhage into the chest cavities. One second. Still trying to record this other thing. Where were we? Okay, hemorrhage into the chest cavities and wounds extending into the bones of the hand. Dr. Singh will testify that some of the injuries sustained are defensive injuries. In addition, Kernodle's injuries include scrapes and bruises on the face, torso, and extremities. There was no evidence that natural disease would have caused or contributed to Kernodle's death. Postmortem toxicology showed Kernodle had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.229 and an amphetamine level of 12 nanograms per milliliter. Dr. Singh will provide her opinion that Kernodle's wounds are consistent with a single-edged or a double-edged knife being the source of the wounds. In addition, the handle and or tip of the knife could account for the appearance of serration on some of Kernodle's face wounds. So a serrated blade. That's like a third one. I know that a portion that I did catch of what's-his-face, Holland talking, is he thinks that there was at least 4 different weapon profiles. So this is this is saying like there's in Kernodle's, in Xana's face at least, that there's some sort of signs of serration of a blade, like a serrated blade. That's how I'm understanding that. Dr. Singh will opine that this serration could be caused by Kernodle fighting and or holding / touching the knife and or hand that is holding the knife causing the injury. Dr. Singh will provide her opinion that the use of a K-bar full-size U.S. Marine Corps fighting knife is consistent with the injuries observed. I don't see how you can keep saying that while also claiming double-edged knife. Okay. It is Dr. Singh's expert opinion that Maddie Mogen's cause of death is multiple sharp force injuries. Dr. Singh's postmortem examination showed a well-developed adult female with stab and incised wounds of the scalp, face, and neck, stab wounds of the chest, and incised wounds of the upper extremities. Dr. Singh also observed associated injuries, including wounds of the lung and liver, as well as perforations of the subclavian vein, subclavian artery, and blood vessels of the chest wall. There is no evidence of natural disease that would have caused or contributed to Mogen's death. Postmortem toxicology testing showed Mogen had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.282. Dr. Singh will provide her opinion that Mogen's wounds are consistent with a single-edged knife as the source of the wounds. Dr. Singh will provide her opinion that the use of a K-bar full-size U.S. Marine Corps fighting knife is consistent with the injuries observed. Dr. Singh will testify that a single large blade, single or double-edged. See, I don't understand how they can just get away with single or double and then say, oh, it has to be the K-bar. You can't say that and say that at the same time. Could be responsible for all the wounds observed on Chapin, Goncalves, Kernodle, and Mogen. Dr. Singh's opinion / testimony will be based on her experience, education, and trainings as detailed in his, well, this should be her. Isn't this a woman? I could have sworn that Veena Singh was a female the last time I checked. Like, I remember looking up a picture and like she had like long black hair. Maybe it's just a mistake. I don't know. Dr. Singh's opinion and testimony will be based on her experience. Okay, they fixed it right here. Education and training. All right, here we go into Ethan's. Here we go into Ethan's. Let me make me smaller so y'all can see everything. Okay. So the date of the autopsy was 11/16/22 at 8 o'clock in the morning in Spokane, Washington. This is just their confidentiality rules. Okay. Summary of case findings. Multiple sharp force injuries, and then the toxicology is on a separate report, but it's attached to these at the end. Opinion. Investigative reports indicate that this 20-year-old male, Ethan Chapin, was found deceased at his girlfriend's shared home. 3 other occupants of the home were also found deceased. Post-mortem examination showed a well-developed adult male with stab and incised wounds of the scalp, face, and neck, 4, a stab wound of the upper chest, 1, incised wounds of the upper extremities, 6, and stab and incised wounds of the lower extremities, 6. Associated injuries included perforations of the jugular vein, subclavian vein, and subclavian artery. There was no evidence of natural disease that would have caused or contributed to death. And then it gives the toxicology results for the amphetamine and the alcohol again, and reiterates that cause of death is multiple sharp force injuries. Okay, background information. 20-year-old male was found deceased at his girlfriend's home. 3 other occupants of the home were also found deceased. The Latell County Coroner's Office requested an autopsy to further investigate the death. Initial observations. The body was found supine in a body bag sealed by tag number 0773078. The name Ethan Chapin and the tag number are written on a piece of blue tape affixed to the outside of the body bag. A piece of green tape bears the medico-legal case number and a notation indicating the body has been x-rayed. An identification band bearing the decedent's name, date of birth, and death. Tag number encircles the right ankle. An identification band bearing the decedent's first name and last initial encircles the left ankle. Clothing and personal effects. The body is received clad in a pair of white athletic style socks. A brown paper bag is secured over each hand by means of silver duct tape. Silver duct tape? They don't have something specific for that kind of thing? Jewelry includes a white metal pendant on a black cord around the neck and a black bracelet on the left wrist. Okay. External examination. The body is that of a well-developed, well-nourished, adult, light-complected male who weighs 228 pounds as received, measures approximately 75 inches in length, and appears compatible with the reported age. The body has been refrigerated and is cool to the touch. Rigor mortis is receding in the muscles of the jaw and extremities. Fixed dark pink livor mortis is present over the posterior and right-sided surfaces of the body, except in areas exposed to pressure. When first viewed, blood is caked over the neck and in the left ear and dried in smears in rivulets over the face, chest, and arms. Head and neck. The scalp hair is brown, wavy, and measures to be approximately 5 inches in length over the crown. The irides, I don't know this word, irides, appears hazel. The corneas are translucent. So they're down to his eyes now. Okay. The corneas are translucent. The scleria are white and the conjunctivi are clear. No petechial hemorrhages are identified on the sclera, conjunctivi, facial skin, or oral mucosa. The nose and ears are normally formed. The anterior teeth are natural and in good condition. Facial hair includes a trimmed mustache and long stubble in the beard distribution. The neck is symmetrical without masses. The trachea is midline. let's see. Thorax is well developed and symmetrical. The chest is slightly concave. The abdomen is flat. The surface of the back is free of lesions. The external genitalia are those of a normal adult male. Bloodless area, there's no, okay, bloodless area of skin erosion. Skin erosion on his genitalia, but there's no blood on it. Extremities. The upper and lower extremities are well developed and symmetrical without absence of digits. The fingernails are short with smooth edges. The toenails range from short to medium length and are somewhat irregularly trimmed. Scars include approximately a 1/4 inch diameter, circular, hypopigmented scar on the upper right chest. Evidence of injury. Note the wounds are described in an arbitrary order, which does not imply sequence or severity. Wound tracks are described for a body at rest in the anatomic position. Entrance. On the right parietal scalp above the right ear is an approximately 1.5 to 1/4 inch linear stab wound oriented from 7 o'clock to 1 o'clock. The 7 o'clock end is squared and the 1 o'clock is sharp. So like the blade would have been at the 1 o'clock and the like flatter part of the blade would have been at the 7 maybe. Discontinuous 1/16 of an inch red marginal abrasion is present. An approximately 1.5 times up to 1/2 inch triangular abraded red contusion is present at the posterior and superior margins of the wound, widest superiorly. At the 7 o'clock end, a 1/8 inch laceration extends inferiorly from the anterior corner of the wound. The hemorrhagic wound tract travels along the skull, involving the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, temporalis muscle, and temporoparital, I can't say that word. Temporoparital, wow, okay, galea, okay. Associated findings, there is moderate associated subscapular, subgaleal, and temporalis muscle hemorrhaging. There is a thin film of blood in the subdural space overlying the left cerebral convexity. The wound tract travels from the decedent's back. His back. Did we read that he had back wounds before? I thought just Xana had back wounds. The wound tract travels from the decedent's back to front and downward to a depth of approximately 7 inches. Jesus. Entrance. On the left parietal scalp, above and behind the left ear, is an approximately 2 times 3/16 inch curvilinear incised wound with undermining extending anteriorly and 1/16 of an inch red marginal abrasion. The hemorrhagic wound tract travels along the skull, involving the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, and left temporalis muscle. This is moderate associated subscapular, subgaleal, and temporalis muscle hemorrhage. There is a thin film of blood in the subdural space overlying the left cerebral convexity. The wound tract travels from the decedent's left to right and back to front to a depth of approximately 1 inch. Entrance, number 3. On the lateral left cheek, anterior to the left ear, is an approximately 1 3/16 inch linear stab wound oriented from 12 to 6. The 12 o'clock end is sharp and the 6 o'clock end is squared. 1/16 to 3/8 of an inch dark red abrasions is present at the margins of the wound, widest inferiorly and continuous with a 1 inch linear abrasion extending anteriorly from the inferior wound end of the wound. The hemorrhagic wound tract involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the left cheek, passing between the mandible and zygomatic arch to enter the oral cavity. No associated findings. The wound tract travels from the decedent's left to right and downward. So like this. Depth cannot be accurately assessed due to the wound tract entering the oral cavity. So like this into the mouth. So like this into the mouth is what it seems like. Number 4. On the left neck is a gaping 1 1/4 times 1/2 inch linear stab wound oriented from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. So, like this? Like this? The 10 o'clock end is squared, and the 4 o'clock end is the sharp end. Is that right? Well, no, if I'm looking at a clock. Yeah, if I'm looking at a clock. So 10 o'clock would be here, and 4 o'clock would be here if I'm facing a clock. But if the clock is like on me facing out, I guess it'd be the opposite. I guess I don't know which way they look at it. I guess like they're looking at you, right? The 10 o'clock square is, the 10 o'clock end is squared and the 4 o'clock end is sharp. The hemorrhagic wound tract involves skin, subcutaneous tissue, superficial and deep musculature, and left internal jugular vein. There is an abundant associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The left jugular vein is perforated. The wound tract travels from the decedent's front to back and downward to a depth of approximately 1.5 inches. Okay, so then stab wounds of the torso. Entrance. It looks like this is the only one that they're depicting on the torso. On the left supraclavicular skin is a gaping 2.5 times 1 inch linear stab wound oriented from 9 to 3. The 9 o'clock end is sharp and the 3 o'clock end is rounded, showing an approximately 4.5 inch linear incised and abraded tail extending laterally to the interior left axilla. The hemorrhagic wound tract involves skin, subcutaneous tissue, superficial and deep musculature, confluence of the left internal jugular and subclavian veins, and left subclavian artery. Associated findings. There is abundant associated soft tissue hemorrhage. Clotted blood is visible at the base of the wound. The left internal jugular and subclavian veins and left subclavian artery are perforated. Depth and direction. The wound tract travels from the decedent's front to back and downward to a depth of approximately 4 inches. Incised wounds of the upper extremities, 6. On the dorsal aspect of the right hand, and at the base of index, 4th and 5th fingers. So do they count it from this finger and as a thumb? At the base of the index, 4th and 5th fingers are superficial incised wounds measuring 1/8 of an inch, 1/2 inch, and 1/2 inch respectively. The wounds on the 4th and 5th fingers show irregular edges. The hemorrhagic wound tracts involve the skin and subcutaneous tissue with no associated findings. Depth and direction. The wound tracts travel from the decedent's front to back to a depth of 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. Entrance number 4. On the palmar aspect of the right hand at the hypothenor eminence is a superficial 3/8 inch linear incised wound. The wound tract involves skin and there's no associated findings. It says it travels from front to back to a depth of approximately 1/16 of an inch. This is the 5th wound. On the ventral left wrist is a transversely oriented 1 3/4 times 3/8 of an inch linear incised wound with a superficial 1/2 inch incised tail extending medially and a 1/2 and 1 3/4 inch incised and abraded tail extending proximally from the lateral end of the wound. The wound tract involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, superficial musculature, and flexor tendons. There is moderate associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The wound tract travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 1/2 an inch. 6th wound. On the dorsal aspect of the left hand at the base of the left index finger is a 1/2 inch superficial incised wound. The wound tract involves the skin with no associated findings. Wound tract travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so this should be the legs coming up, the lower extremities. On the medial right thigh is a 9/16 by 1/16 of an inch stab wound oriented from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Both ends are sharp. So like a double-edged weapon. Yellow abrasion is present at the margins of the wound, extending up to 1/2 inch from 9 o'clock end of the wound, and a 1/4 inch superficial incised tail extends laterally from 3 o'clock end of the wound. The minimally hemorrhagic wound tract involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and superficial musculature of the medial thigh. The skin superior to this wound shows a linear 4-inch linear abrasion. The wound tract travels from the decedent's left to right and back to front to a depth of approximately 1 inch. At the lateral right knee is a gaping 4-inch by 1 inch linear incised wound, 5 inches when reapproximated. That's almost the entire width of your leg. Right at the right knee is an almost 5-inch gaping wound. That is literally the entire width of your leg. Shit. That's the entire width of your leg. That's crazy. Wow. Wound tract involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature. Moderate associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The wound tract travels from the decedent's right to left. That's the first time, isn't it? Everything else has been left to right. I think that's the first time we've read right to left. I could be wrong. There might have been one other time, but we've said left to right 1,500 times, so that feels weird. Right to left and slightly back to front to a depth of approximately 1 1/4 inches on a lateral right calf. So now we had the knee. Now we're going down to the calf, right underneath the knee. More gaping wounds. Is a gaping 2.5 inch by 3/4 inch lineal stab wound, 3 inches when reapproximated. Oriented from 12 to 6, so it goes up and down. The 12 o'clock end is squared and the 6 o'clock end is sharp. So this one looks like it could have been a singular edged weapon with the squared edge on the other side, the way that the K-bar knife does look. But the other one seems to be double-edged. Two different weapons on his leg. Sounds like 2 different blades just on Ethan's leg. And this one goes from 9 to 3. So the one above the knee goes across. I mean, the one at the knee goes across, and the one at the calf goes up and down. And it definitely seems like just on his leg alone is 2 different blades. No associated findings. The wound tract travels from the decedent's right to left and back to front to a depth of approximately 3.5 inches. Man, they did it to both legs. On the posterior left thigh, so now we're on the other side, is a gaping wound complex consisting of at least 3 intersecting stab wounds, measuring 1.5 inches, 2.5 inches, and 2 1/4 inches in length from lateral to medial, with a combined width of up to 2 inches. There is abundant associated soft tissue hemorrhage. Wound tracts travel from the decedent's back to front to a depth of approximately 4 inches. Oh my God. Based on characteristics of the least distorted wounds, the findings are consistent with a blade approximately 5/32 to 3/16 in thickness. Okay, hold on, guys. This finally finished up. Let me stop this real fast. No. Okay. So like I said, I'll go over the interview with that Chris Holland guy at some point tomorrow, and we'll do a live about it. We'll do a live about it. Okay. Clothing not applicable. We know that he was naked with just socks on, but was covered in blankets. Blunt force injuries, head and neck, none. Thorax and abdomen, none. For extremities, it says a curvilinear discontinuous red abrasion extends transversely over the right deltoid, measuring 2 inches in length. On the dorsal left hand is a 1/8 of an inch irregular red abrasion. On the dorsal left wrist is a faint linear 1/2 inch red contusion. Body cavities. I don't know if we need to read all this stuff. I mean, I guess we do, but like if there's nothing in here, the majority of this looks normal. This is like what the inside of the body looks like the organs and stuff like that. The body is entered with the standard coronal and Y-shaped thoraco-abdominal incisions. The intact diaphragm separates the thoracic and abdominal cavities. All body organs are normal in anatomic position. There are filmy adhesions between the left lung and chest wall. There are approximately 5 milliliters of serosanguineous fluid in the pericardial sac. The serous surfaces are smooth and glistening. Head. Reflection of the scalp reveals injuries as described above. The skull is intact and of normal thickness. The brain weighs 1,600 grams. The dura mater and falx cerebri are intact and not adherent to the brain. The leptomeninges are thin and transparent. There is no epidural or subarachnoid hemorrhage. The cerebral hemispheres are symmetrical with mild diffuse flattening of the gyri and narrowing of the sulci. I'm hoping I'm getting those words right because, I just don't know. The cranial nerves and blood vessels at the base of the brain are free of abnormality. The cerebral ventricles are of normal caliber. Serial I feel like that word's missing a letter, but maybe not. Coronal sections of cerebral hemispheres show a uniform cortical ribbon and no focal lesions of the cortex, white matter, or deep nuclei. There is no gross evidence of infection or mass lesion. Sections through the brainstem and cerebellum show no focal lesions. The pituitary gland is normally positioned in the sella turcica and is unremarkable. The dura is stripped from the inner table of the cranial foci, and no basilar fractures are identified. The spinal cord is not removed. The neck is dissected in layers, showing normal anatomic relations. The left neck musculature shows injuries as described above. The hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage are intact. The cricoid cartilage and the rings of the trachea are intact. The cervical spine shows normal alignment. Palpation and manipulation reveal no fractures. The larynx shows no evidence, of obstruction or edema. The vocal cords are symmetrical and free of abnormalities. The epiglottis is normal. The carotid vessels are intact. The tongue is normally formed. Cardiovascular system. The pericardial surfaces are smooth and glistening. The pericardial sac is intact and free of significant adhesions. The heart weighs 420 grams. The coronary arteries arise normally and follow the distribution of the right dominant pattern. Serial cross-sectioning reveals no significant atherosclerosis. This is basically just saying that his heart was working. That's what it means earlier when it said there was no disease, is that they've gone through all of their organs and stuff like that and see that everything is normal. The aorta and its major branches arise normally and follow the usual course. Yeah, everything was fine. Respiratory system. Upon opening the chest cavity, the lungs are fully expanded. The right and left lungs weigh 390 and 290 grams respectively. The upper and lower airways contain a small amount of foamy white fluid. The mucosal surfaces are smooth and yellow tan. The pleural surfaces are smooth and glistening and unremarkable, save for adhesions as noted above. The pulmonary parenchyma is light pink and free of masses. There is an approximately 1.5 centimeter bleb in the right middle lobe of the lung. The cut surfaces exude minimal blood and frothy fluid. There is no evidence of thromboembolism, infarction, or neoplasia. The pulmonary vasculature is normally developed, patent, and free of gross abnormalities. No masses on the liver. Everything here with the gallbladder is normal. I don't see anything saying there's any cuts in anything. The gastric mucosa is arranged in the usual rugal folds, and the lumen contains approximately 100 milliliters of watery tan fluid without food or pill fragments. The stomach courses of the small bowel in the usual fashion. The mucosal and serosal surfaces of the small and large bowel are unremarkable. The appendix is present and is grossly unremarkable. The pancreas has a normal tan lobulated appearance. So no food in his stomach. 100 milliliters of what appears to be a watery tan fluid, which is really like stomach bile color, right? Stomach bile color, right? But it shows no pill fragments. So the amphetamines that were already in his system were already very well, digested, I guess. No food, yeah. No food. Welcome, Miss Black Heart Lobster. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for the 5 gifted memberships, Sharon. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for being a member for 9 months, RC. Anyone else nervous about what is in the autopsy report? No. No. I just know it's going to be sad. Like it's already bad. Like we knew about the injuries. We've known about the injuries for like a while. We just haven't been able to actually get the real autopsy reports. I think it was like October. Was it October? I think maybe it was even like before the plea. It's been a while now. It's been almost a year. We're in June, guys. We're less than a month away from a year. But something came out in some documents and listed a whole bunch of the wounds and stuff. So we did a report about that. And then when the Sutton report came out, we did a really in-depth one on that, and we separated it by bedroom. So it was 2 victims to each video. And I put like the body outlines and arrows, and like it's all kinds of detailed. So like some of this we knew, but these are the full-on details. Like we weren't aware, as far as I can remember, that the wound to Ethan's knee was practically his entire knee. And it's definitely new information that it seems like there was 2 different blades used on just one side. Yeah, there's a lot. There's definitely a lot here. Okay, let's see. So when it comes to his kidneys, the urinary bladder contains a moderate amount of clear yellow urine. Everything looked normal, apparently. The spleen was normal. Pituitary gland is normal. No spine, rib, or limb fractures. No metallic foreign bodies. Toxicology reports are separate. Biopsy samples of major organs and structures are retained in fixative. Whole organs retained, none. No specimens were submitted for microscopic examination. Postmortem screenings for glucose and ketones is negative. Postmortem urinary toxicology screening is positive for amphetamines and ethanol, which is alcohol. This is telling you how long you can keep it. Blood, body fluids, tissues, organs, and physical trace materials collected during the examination are routinely held for a period of time after release of the body and will undergo biohazard disposal unless transferred to a lab or other agency or otherwise released by special arrangement. Okay, well, we know that in the FBI lab report that was written in January 2023, that was filed by the defense in June of 2025, that it said that the debris, that's not debris, that was in Ethan's hand, was preserved for further testing. I just wonder where it is now, because it's been definitely longer than 6 months to a year. And we're, getting close to the 3-year mark from the January time that the damn thing was filed. Or like we're already really past that, really. So, So here is the actual toxicology. Cardiac blood. Ethanol 122.0. 0.122. Amphetamine 260. Yeah, we already knew that result. All of the following tests were performed for this case. For each test, the compounds listed were included in the scope. The reporting limit listed for each compound represents the lowest concentration of the compound that will be reported as being positive. If the compound is listed as none detected, it is not present above the reporting limit. Please refer to the positive findings section of the report for those compounds that were identified as being present. But then it moves into Kaylee's. So I guess this is all the stuff that they tested for, but we know that they only found amphetamine, but they checked for methamphetamine, they checked for MDMA, isopropanol, acetone, amphetamines, barbiturates, cannabinoids, which I thought they smoked. So it's kind of interesting that they didn't have any at all, like no THC at all in their system. I find that odd. Oxycodone. Yeah, they tested for all this stuff. Okay. So now we're moving into Kaylee's. So now that we know how they're written, let's see. All right. Summary of case findings. Multiple sharp force injuries, blunt force injuries to the head, asphyxial injuries, and then, of course, the toxicology is separate. Investigative reports indicate that this 21-year-old female, Kaylee Goncalves, was found deceased at her shared home. 3 other occupants of the home were also found deceased. Post-mortem examination showed a well-developed adult female with stab and incised wounds of the scalp, face, and neck, 24 plus. Stab and incised wounds of the chest, 11. Stab and incised wounds of the upper extremities, 3. Associated injuries included punctures of the outer table of the skull, injuries to the teeth and tongue, perforations of the subclavian artery and vein, and hemorrhage to the chest cavities. Blunt force injuries included scalp laceration, bleeding around the brain, and nasal fractures, as well as scrapes on the nose and cheeks, bruising around the eyes, and patterned bruises extending across the lower face. Petechial hemorrhages were present in the eyes and mouth. There was no evidence of natural disease that would have caused or contributed to the death. And then we know that the alcohol content was 0.107. Trying to see if there's a way I can turn down this freaking brightness on my screen. Yeah, I need this to be like a little bit not so in my face. Holy shit. I don't know if that'll work. We'll see. Okay. The cause of death is multiple sharp force injuries. Blunt force injuries of the head and asphyxial injuries were listed as significant contributors to death. Okay. Background information. This 21-year-old female was found deceased at her shared home. 3 other occupants of the home were also found deceased. The Latell County Coroner's Office requested an autopsy to further investigate the death. The body is found supine in a body bag sealed by tag number 0773078. The name Kaylee Goncalves and the tag number are written on a piece of blue tape affixed to the outside of the body bag. A piece of green tape bears the medical legal or medical legal case number and a notation indicating the body has been x-rayed. An identification band bearing the decedent's name, date of birth, and death and tag number encircles the right ankle. Body is received clad in a black short sleeve graphic t-shirt, a pair of gray and black plaid fleece pajama bottoms, and a gray footy style sock, which is partially on the left foot. We saw the other one left on the bed when they took pictures of the bed after they took the comforter off. It was underneath, sort of like rolled up just a little bit over the forefoot and toes only. So it wasn't even like on all the way. It had come off from around her heel. The t-shirt is blood-stained. A brown paper bag is secured over each hand by means of silver duct tape. Jewelry, including a white metal daith piercing on the left ear. External examination. The body is that of a well-developed, well-nourished, adult, light-complected female who weighs 168 pounds as received, measures approximately 64 inches in length, and appears compatible with the reported age. The body has been refrigerated and is cool to the touch. Rigor mortis is receding in the muscles of the jaw and extremities. Fixed dark pink liver mortis is present over the posterior surfaces of the body, except in areas exposed to pressure. Blood is congealed on the face and in the right ear and matted within the hair. Dried rivulets and smears of blood are present on the chest and left hand. Head and neck. The scalp hair is brown and blonde, straight, and measures up to approximately 24 inches in length over the crown. Extensions have been applied to the hair and upper eyelashes. Now, if you look real close into the crime scene photos, you can see like her fake eyelashes all over the bed. They're just all over the damn bed. The irides appear brown. The corneas are clouded. The sclerae. How do you say that freaking word? That's like the second time. How do you say that word? Pronounce it. Did it just say sclera, like without an L?
Sclera.
Scara with no L. I hate the English language. That's stupid. Okay. The scara are white and the conjunctivi are clouded. The nose and ears are normally formed. White foam is present within the mouth and dried around the lips over the right cheek. The anterior teeth are natural and in good condition, except for injuries to be described below. There appears to have been a fixed retainer in the mouth, now resting on the... She got beaten with her retainer in her mouth? There appears to have been a fixed retainer in the mouth, now resting on the tongue due to traumatic disruption of the teeth. What's a fixed retainer? Something that's like actually screwed in? Or is that something you can still take out? A fixed retainer is a thin metal wire bonded behind your teeth to maintain alignment after braces. Oh, God. So, like this. Yeah. In the teeth. And because of the injuries, it's now resting on her tongue because it doesn't have anything, I guess, to be attached to. Oh, my God. I guess I didn't realize that she had anything in her mouth like that. Okay. The neck is symmetrical without mass. The trachea is midline. Thorax and abdomen. The thorax is well developed and symmetrical. The abdomen is mildly protuberant. The surface of the back shows focal injury to be described below and is otherwise free of lesions. The breasts are symmetrical without palpable masses, and genitalia is normal. Extremities. The upper and lower extremities are well developed and symmetrical without absence of digits. The skin shows patchy, tan orange coloration, more prominent over the lower extremities. Their fingernails are short and neatly trimmed with irregular small patches of clear and white polish on some of the nails. The toenails range from short to medium length. The great and second toenails on both feet show polish in a French tip pattern. The remaining nails are without polish. Identifying marks and scars. Identifying marks and scars include a tattoo reading "Wish You Were Here" over the anterior left bicep, as well as numerous parallel linear scars over the left forearm. Numerous parallel linear scars over the left forearm. I want to see what that's telling me that looks like. Because I don't want to say something and it not be what I think it looks like. Okay, yeah. That's what I was about to ask, bro. Because this is what it looks like. That's what I was just about to ask. So maybe sometime, like when she was a teenager, maybe when she was younger. Sounds like when she was younger. Okay. Evidence of injury. The wounds are described in an arbitrary order, which does not, okay, the same thing as before. They're just, it's as they're being described, not in the order in which they think that it happened. Entrance. Make sure this is right. Okay. On the right frontal scalp, extending posteriorly, those like letters together are really hard to say. Posteriorly and medially across the midline from the hairline is a gaping, approximately 2.5 inch times 3/4 inch linear incised wound with undermining extending posteriorly and laterally. The anterolateral end is branched and shows irregular red abrasion at the margins, as well as parallel linear red abrasions extending inferiorly from the end of the wound. The wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, glia, and outer table of the skull. There is moderate associated subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage. The outer table of the skull shows an approximately 1/8 times 3/16 inch, roughly triangular defect. Okay. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and slightly left to right to a depth of approximately 1 inch. On the right superior parietal scalp is an approximately 1/2 times 1/16 inch linear incised wound with discontinuous 1/16 inch red marginal abrasion and undermining extending laterally. The wound track involves the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, and glia. There is an abundant associated subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage. Depth and direction. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and slightly left to right and downward to a depth of approximately 3/8 of an inch. Third wound. On the left frontoparietal scalp is an approximately 1 3/4 and up to 1/16 inch J-shaped incised wound with 1/16 to 1/4 inch red marginal abrasion and slight undermining extending medially. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, glia, and outer table of the skull. Moderate associated subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage. The outer table of the skull shows a superficial curvilinear 3/4 inch incised defect. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and slightly left to right to a depth of approximately 3/4 of an inch. On the left temporoparietal scalp is an approximately 2.5 and up to 3/8 inch linear incised wound. The minimally hemorrhagic wound track involves the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, and the left temporalis muscle. There is an approximately 1 1/4 inch linear defect at the superior aspect of the left temporalis muscle with scant associated subgaleal and intramuscular hemorrhage. The wound track travels from the decedent's left to right and slightly back to front to a depth of approximately 1/2 an inch. On the left, this is the fifth one. On the left superior parietal scalp is an approximately 1/2 to 1/16 inch linear incised wound. Wound track involves scalp, subcutaneous tissue, and glia. There is scant associated subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage, with a wound track that travels from the decedent's front to back and downward to a depth of approximately 1/4 of an inch. Sixth wound. This is all on like the head area. On the left superior occipital scalp is an approximately 3/4 to 1/32 of an inch linear incised wound with undermining extending medially. Faint purple ecchymosis surrounds this wound. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, and glia. Focal subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage surrounds this wound. The wound track travels from the decedent's back to front and slightly downward to a depth of approximately 1/4 inch. Seventh wound. On the medial left forehead is an approximately 1 1/4 and up to 3/8 of an inch curvilinear incised wound with undermining extending medially. Irregular tan abrasion is present at the margins of this wound, more prominent superiorly. The medial wound edge shows dark brown discoloration. The hemorrhagic wound tract involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue of the forehead, the glia, and the outer table of the skull. Focal subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage surrounds this wound. The outer table of the skull shows an approximately 1 times 3/8 of an inch cluster of linear and curvilinear defects, resulting in a posteriorly displaced segment of bone. So does that mean that the knife, like, dislodged a piece of skull. Posteriorly displaced segment of bone. Yeah, like basically the knife cut into the bone and displaced a piece of the skull bone. Okay, the wound track travels from the descendant's front to back and left to right to a depth of approximately 1 inch. 8 and 9. Within the left eyebrow is a wound complex consisting of 2 perpendicularly intersecting incised wounds, each measuring 9/16 to up to 3/8 of an inch. See, this sounds like the shoulders. They're saying this is the eyebrow. 2 parallel linear 1/4 inch tan abrasions extend superiorly from the superior edge of the wound complex. Within the left eyebrow. Okay, well, we'll see what it says for the shoulder area. But that's interesting that it's the same, like 2 parallel lines. Okay. The minimally hemorrhagic wound tracts involve the skin and subcutaneous tissue with no associated findings. The wound tract travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 1/8 of an inch. 10th wound. On the central forehead, so right in the middle, is an approximately 2 times up to 1/4 inch curvilinear incised wound with undermining extended leftward. Discontinuous dark red marginal abrasion is present, most prominently at the right lateral and inferior margins. The hemorrhagic wound tract involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the forehead with no associated findings. The wound tract travels from the descendant's front to back and right to left to a depth of approximately 1/2 inch. So some of these wounds are left to right, and some of these wounds are right to left. That's important. 11 and 12, entrance. On the right medial forehead is an approximately 1 times 1/4 inch wound complex consisting of at least 2 intersecting incised wounds with 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch dark red marginal abrasions. The hemorrhagic wound tracts involve the skin and subcutaneous tissue superiorly and the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature inferiorly with no associated findings. The wound tract travels from the decedent's front to back and downward to a depth of approximately 1/4 inch. Entrance of number 13. On the right forehead, partially following the contour of the right eyebrow, is an approximately 3 1/4 times up to 1/2 inch curvilinear incised wound with scalloped edges and undermining extending inferiorly. The skin at the infromedial wound edge shows dark brown discoloration. The hemorrhagic wound tract involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and paraorbital musculature with no associated findings. The wound tract travels from the decedent's front to back and downward to a depth of approximately 1/2 inch. Okay, so number 14. At the right temple is an approximately 3/4 times 3/16 inch linear stab wound oriented from 12 to 6. The 12 o'clock end is squared with the 6 o'clock end being sharp. An approximately 1/2 inch linear abraded tail extends inferiorly from the 6 o'clock end. The wound tract involves skin, subcutaneous tissue, and paraorbital musculature. Purple ecchymosis. Is it? I think that's ecchymosis. Ecchymosis surrounds this wound, more prominent anteriorly and inferiorly to the wound. The wound tract travels from the decedent's right to left and downward to a depth of approximately 1 inch. Number 15. At the tip of the nose is a 5/16 and 1/32 inch superficial linear incised wound that involves the skin with no associated findings. Okay, and it says the same thing, except for this goes from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 1/16 of an inch. On the upper right lip is an approximately 1 to 1/16 inch linear incised wound with slight undermining extending inferiorly. The hemorrhagic wound travel track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue with no associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's right to left and slightly downward to a depth of approximately 1/8 of an inch. On the left cheek is a cluster of at least 5 stab wounds. Ranging from 1/4 to 1 inch in length and 1/8 to 3/16 inch in width, oriented in various directions. At least 3 of these wounds show 1 squared end and 1 sharp end. The wound tracks converge, involving the skin, subcutaneous tissue, subcutaneous blood vessels, and musculature of the left cheek. 2 wound tracks penetrate the maxillary bone and enter the left maxillary sinus. So somewhere around here to be able to come like out through the sinus area. Oh God. Dark brown marginal abrasion is present at the edges of these wounds. A set of parallel curvilinear dark brown abrasions extend from the lateral corner of the left eye over the left cheek, connecting the edges of 4 of these wounds. Someone needs to draw that out. Someone needs to take that description and draw that out. That's crazy. Connecting the edges of 4 of these wounds. Blue and purple ecchymosis surrounds this wound complex. Blood drains from the left nares. There is patchy hemioaspiration pattern. Let me make sure. Let me see how to say this word right. This sounded like a big old dummy. Oh my God. Ecchymosis. I was saying it right. Alrighty. Depth and direction. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's front to back and left to right to a depth of up to 2 inches. Number 22. Why do we have... Oh, okay. I was like, why is there an asterisk? So there's an asterisk because it says, because these wounds coalesce, an exact count cannot be determined. Okay. The lower labial mucosa shows multiple parallel and intersecting superfacial and deep incised wounds, resulting in curled strips of oral mucosa and exposed oral musculature. The hemorrhagic wound tract involves the oral mucosa, oral musculature, teeth, and tongue. So all the bottom. The right maxillary cuspid, lateral incisor, and central incisor, and left maxillary central incisor, teeth 6-9 by the universal dental numbering system, are sharply divided, with the right maxillary cuspid avulsed from its socket. Additionally, the right mandibular cuspid, lateral incisor, and central incisor, and left mandibular central incisor, which would be teeth 27 through 24 by the universal dental numbering system, are sharply divided. The tongue shows numerous sharp force defects extending up to 3/4 of an inch into the muscle. Tooth fragments and clotted blood are admixed within the oral cavity. A wire appearing to be part of a fixed retainer has been displaced and is resting on the tongue. The wound tracks travel overall from the decedent's front to back. Depth cannot be accurately assessed due to the wound tract entering the oral cavity. 23 and 24. On the anterior neck, okay, the neck. Now, we're being told by several people now at this point that Maddie and Kaylee both have 2 identical double cuts under their neck from ear to ear that were apparently done post-mortem, after death. So let's see what this says about that. On the anterior neck are 2 gaping, curvilinear, incised wounds with somewhat irregular edges and undermining extending inferiorly, each measuring approximately 4 inches in length and up to 1 inch in width. So each cut is 4 inches long and 1 inch wide. God damn. The superior wound shows focal irregular dark brown abrasion to the superior and inferior wound edges. The inferior wound shows focal yellow tan abrasions at the inferior wound edge. Wound tracks involve skin, subcutaneous tissue, and superficial musculature of the anterior neck with no associated findings. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's front to back and downward to a depth of approximately 1 inch. Okay, but is she going to say in here that they were done post-mortem at some point? I'm assuming so, right? Because where else would they be getting that from? So we'll see if there's something else said here. But it goes straight into the torso after this. It doesn't say anything in talking about the neck injury, about it being post-mortem. Okay. Stab and incised wounds of the torso. On the medial upper left chest above the left clavicle is a gaping 3/4 by 1/2 inch stab wound oriented from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Both ends are rounded. The underlying soft tissue shows 2 distinct linear defects. The hemorrhagic wound tracts converge, involving the skin, subcutaneous tissue, musculature of the supraclavicular fossa, and the left subclavian artery and vein. There are approximately 1,000 milliliters of blood and blood clot left within the chest cavity. Jesus. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's front to back and downward to a depth of approximately 4 inches. 3 and 4. Extending from the upper left chest over the anterior left shoulder. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go right here. Extending from the upper left chest over the anterior left shoulder. So I'm guessing like this area? Upper left chest over the anterior left, I don't know, somewhere around here, are 2 parallel curvilinear incised wounds measuring 3 3/4 up to 1 inch and 5 1/2 to up to 1 1/4 inches with undermining extending superiorly. The wound tracks involve the skin at the medial ends and the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature at the lateral ends. This is moderate associated soft tissue hemorrhage at the lateral end of the inferior wound. The left shoulder joint capsule is exposed. So it would be like right here then, and it's so deep you could see her shoulder bone. Like the cap of the joint in the shoulder. And this is Kaylee. So we're going to have to see if something similar is on Maddie or not. It sounds a little different than a signature when you hear that the bone is exposed. You know what I mean? The wound tracks travel from the decedent's front to back and slightly upward to a depth of approximately 2 inches. Number 5. On the interior left chest above the left breast is an approximately 1 1/4 and 5/16 inch stab wound oriented from 10 to 4. The 10 to 4 end is squared and the 4 o'clock end is sharp. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, musculature, and left first intercostal space. The intercostal artery and vein are incised. There is abundant associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back, slightly left to right and downward. Depth cannot be accurately assessed due to the wound track entering the pleural cavity. Number 6 and 7. On the interior left chest at the superior aspect of the left breast are 2 approximately 1 1/4 and 3/16 inch stab wounds oriented from 10 to 4, again, superior, and 9 to 3, inferior. So like this, and then like this, like that. The 4 o'clock and 3 o'clock ends are squared, and the 10 o'clock and 9 o'clock ends are sharp. The hemorrhagic wound tracks involve skin, subcutaneous tissue, breast tissue, and musculature of the left chest with no associated findings. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's front to back and downward to a depth of approximately 3 inches. Number 8, entrance. On the interior left chest at the medial aspect of the left breast is an approximately 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch linear stab wound oriented from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. The 9 o'clock end is sharp and the 3 o'clock end is squared. The wound track travels the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the left chest, the left third rib, and intercostal space, and the upper and lower lobes of the left lung. The intercostal artery and vein are incised. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 5 inches. On the interior right chest, at the medial aspect of the right breast, this would be number 9 and number 9 through 11, is a gaping, approximately 1 1/4 to 1/2 inch stab wound oriented from 11 to 5. Both ends are rounded. The underlying soft tissue shows 3 intersecting linear defects. The hemorrhagic wound tracks converge, involving the 3rd intercostal space, 4th rib, and 4th intercostal space, the lower lobe of the right lung, the right diaphragmatic leaflet, and the liver. Associated findings. There are approximately 400 milliliters of blood and blood clot within the right chest cavity. The right lung shows associated parenchymal hematoma. The liver shows approximately 1 1/4 to 3.5 inch wound track. She drowned in her own blood, which we sort of already knew. But altogether, is 1,400 milliliters of blood in her chest. That sounds exactly like what it sounds like. The wounds travel from the decedent's left to right and downward to a depth of approximately 7 inches. I mean, that's practically your whole body with some of these people. Okay, stab and incise wounds of the upper extremities. On the lateral left upper arm is an approximately 3 5/16 inch lineal incised wound. The minimally hemorrhagic wound tract involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue of the left upper arm with no associated findings. The wound tract travels from the decedent's left to right to a depth of approximately 3/8 of an inch. Number 2, entrance. On the posterior left upper arm is an approximately 1/2 by 1/8 inch linear stab wound oriented from 8 to 2. The 8 o'clock end is squared and the 2 o'clock end is sharp. The wound tract involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the upper arm with no associated findings. Wound tract travels from the decedent's back to front to a depth of approximately 3/4 of an inch. Number 3. On the left elbow is an approximately 7/16 times 1/8 of an inch linear incised wound with irregular edges. Rectangular red contusion extends medially from the medial end of the wound. The hemorrhagic wound tract involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue of the left elbow. The wound tract travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 1/8 of an inch. Clothing. The shirt worn by the decedent shows defects corresponding with the stab wounds of the torso. Based on characteristics of the least distorted wounds, the findings are consistent with a blade approximately 1 3/16 to 1/4 inch in width and approximately 5/32 to 3/16 in thickness, with a double-edged segment and a single-edged segment. With a double-edged segment? Like a blade with both? Is there a blade with both? Like, is there a blade where it's double at the beginning and then like only halfway through and then it goes down to single? I've never seen that. Blunt force, asphyxial, and other injuries. Head and neck. Petechial hemorrhages are prominently visible on the bulbar conjunctivi and oral mucosa. Confluent purple contusion extend over the mandibular, alveolar, and lower labial mucosa. The bridge of the nose shows irregular dark red abrasion measuring a 1/2 inch in greatest dimension. Rectangular 1/16 and 3/4 inch dark red abrasion extends along the left inferior preorbital skin. Palpitation and manipulation reveal nasal bone fracture. There are bilateral paraorbital ecchymosis. Punctate red abrasions and a linear 3/4 inch abrasion extend across the interior aspect of the nose. Curvilinear brown abrasions extend over the left cheek described above. Blue contusion is present over the lateral left cheek. Parallel linear purple contusions extend transversely from the right perioral skin across the right cheek, intersecting with an approximately 3-inch rectangular abraded contusion extending diagonally over the right cheek to the right preauricular skin. The skin superior to this set of injuries shows a set of delicate transverse superficial red tan abrasions ranging in length from 1/8 to 1/4 inch. Superior to these is a deeper transverse 3/4 inch linear red abrasion with irregular edges. A rectangular purple contusion with central sparing extends transversely from the left paraoral skin across the left cheek. The skin inferior to this contusion shows a transverse 1/2 inch linear red abrasion with irregular edges. The occipital scalp shows 2 linear partial thickness lacerations measuring approximately 1.5 inches superiorly and 1 3/4 inches inferiorly. The inferior wound shows surrounding red tan abrasion extending up to 1/2 inch from the wound's edge and more prominent inferiorly. There is associated subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage. Intracranial examination reveals a thin film of subdural hemorrhage, more prominent at the inferior aspect of the frontal lobes and right temporal lobe. There is patchy subarachnoid hemorrhage, most prominent at the inferior aspects of the frontal and temporal lobes and cerebellum. Parenchymal contusions involve the inferior frontal lobes and left temporal pole. Thorax and abdomen. On the midline upper back is an approximately 1/2 by 1/8 of an inch curvilinear superficial abrasion with surrounding purple contusion. Extremities. On the dorsal left hand are 3 red abrasions At the base of the index finger, a vertically oriented 3/4 inch linear abrasion with underlying blue contusion. Proximal to the fourth finger, a transversely oriented 3/4 inch linear abrasion, and proximal to the fifth finger, a 1/4 inch diameter, roughly circular abrasion. At the medial base of the left fifth finger is a bloodless, circular, superficial skin defect resembling a de-roofed blister. So she had a blister on her hand, and it must have busted, I guess, while she was fighting back. Body cavities. The body is entered with the standard coronal and Y-shaped thoraco-abdominal incisions. A normally formed diaphragm separates the thoracic and abdominal cavities. All body organs are in normal and anatomic position. No adhesions are in any of the body cavities. Bilateral hemothoraces are described above. The serous surfaces are smooth and glistening. Reflection of the scalp reveals injuries as described above. The skull is of normal thickness. The brain weighs 1,350 grams. The dura mater and falx cerebri are intact and not adherent to the brain. The leptomeninges are thin and transparent. The cerebral hemispheres are symmetrical with diffuse flattening of the gyri and narrowing of the sulci. The cranial nerves and bloody vessels at the base of the brain are free of abnormality. The cerebral ventricles are mildly compressed. Serial coronal sections of cerebral hemisphere show a uniform cortical ribbon and no focal lesions of the cortex, white matter, or deep nuclei. There is no gross evidence of infection or mass lesion. Sections through the brainstem and cerebellum show no focal lesions. The pituitary gland is normally positioned in the sella Turkitia and is unremarkable. The dura is stripped from the inner table of the cranial foci, and no basilar fractures are identified. The spinal cord is not removed. The neck is dissected in layers, showing normal and anatomic relations. The neck musculature shows injuries as described above. The hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage are intact. Yeah, okay. I was expecting more damage to that area, honestly, with the way that they've talked about things. Okay. The trichoid cartilage and the rings of the trachea are intact. The cervical spine shows normal alignment. Palpation and manipulation reveal no fractures. The larynx shows no evidence of obstruction or edema. The vocal cords are symmetrical and free from abnormalities. The epiglottis is normal. The carotid vessels are intact. The tongue is normally formed. Cardiovascular system. The pericardial surfaces are smooth and glistening. The pericardial sac is intact and free of significant fluid or adhesions. The heart weighs 240 grams. The coronary arteries arise normally and follow the distribution of the right dominant pattern. Serial cross-sectioning reveals no significant atherosclerosis. Serial sections of the myocardium are taken from the apex, and the base of the heart is opened along lines of blood flow. The chambers and valves are proportionate. The valves are normally formed, thin and pliable, and free of vegetations and degenerative changes. The aorta and its major branches arise normally and follow the usual course without coarctation. I don't see anything that shows that there's any issues found inside. Upon opening the chest cavity, lungs are fully expanded and are anteriorly displaced by hemorrhasis, more prominent on the left. The right and left lung weighs 330 and 190 grams respectively. The upper and lower airways contain a moderate amount of hemorrhagic mucoid material. The mucosal surfaces are smooth and yellow tan. Everything is free of masses. No evidence of thromboembolism, infarction, or neoplasia. Pulmonary vasculature is normally developed. Liver weighs 930 grams. Gallbladder contains a small amount of bile without stones. So here is like the stomach going into the stomach. The esophagus is lined with gray-white, smooth mucosa. The gastric mucosa is arranged in the usual rugal folds, and the lumen contains abundant dark brown fluid and partially digested food fragments. The stomach courses to the small bowel in the usual fashion. The mucosal and serosal surfaces of the small and large bowel are unremarkable. The appendix is present and is grossly unremarkable, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So it does show that she does have partially digested food fragments in her stomach. And we know that they ate at the grub truck. So it makes sense for there to be food in her stomach. Everything in the urinary tract seems normal. No gross evidence of pregnancy. She had an IUD. She had an IUD, but no gross signs of pregnancy. Spleen, everything with the spleen was normal. Pituitary gland is of normal size. Bone framework is all normal except for everything noted with the injuries. No spine, rib, or limb fractures are identified. A T-shaped device projects over the pelvis. Well, that's the IUD, I think. No metallic foreign bodies are identified. Postmortem screening for ketones shows 5 milligrams in the urine and is negative in the vitreous fluid. Glucose is negative. And then, of course, we know that we have the toxicology below. Yeah, it's just the alcohol. Cavity blood used. And again, this is just the same thing that they tested for. All right, now here we move on to Maddie. Multiple sharp force injuries. And then again, of course, it says to see the toxicology, that's separate. It's attached, but separate. Investigative reports indicate that this 21-year-old female, Maddie Mogen, was found deceased at her shared home. 3 other occupants of the home were also found deceased. Postmortem examination showed a well-developed adult female with stab and incised wounds of the scalp, face, and neck, 13. Stab wounds of the chest, 5. And incised wounds of the upper extremities, 10. Associated injuries included wounds of the lung and liver, as well as perforations of the subclavian vein, subclavian artery, and the blood vessels of the chest wall. There was no evidence of natural disease that would have caused or contributed to the death. Postmortem toxicology testing showed a blood alcohol concentration of 0.282. Yeah, we know Maddie was out of it. Not completely out of it because she was able to take the dog out. She was able to walk around, look for the dog, go downstairs, knock on Bethany's door after calling Bethany, call Jack back and forth. You know what I mean? Like but she was still like way out of it compared to Kaylee. You can just tell by how she was walking in the videos that led up to the grub truck that she was feeling it. Feeling it for sure. Okay, so background information. Briefly, this 21-year-old female was found deceased at her shared home. 3 other occupants of the home were also found deceased. The Latell County Coroner's Office requested an autopsy to further investigate the death. Initial observations. The body is found supine in a body bag sealed by tag number 0773080. The name Maddie Mogen and the tag number are written on a piece of blue tape affixed to the outside of the body bag. A piece of green tape bears the I always mess up right here on this word. Medico-legal case number and a notation indicating the body has been x-rayed. 2 identification bands encircle the right ankle, one bearing the decedent's name, dates of birth, and death and tag number, and the other bearing the decedent's first name. I don't see anything on here saying that the hands were, you know what I mean? The way that we read in Kaylee and Kaylee and Ethan's, that the hands were covered in paper bags. I wonder why this one doesn't show paper bags. Yeah, I don't see it. Interesting. Okay. Clothing and personal effects. The body is received clad in a pink one-shoulder camisole and a pair of black athletic style pants. A tank top is blood-stained. The tank top is blood-stained. The pants are wet in areas. A brown paper bag is secured over each hand by means of silver duct tape. Now, when it says that the pants are wet in areas, I will say that on the bed, when you look at the pictures of the knife sheath, there's what seems to be like a yellow outline, like her urine released when she passed away. I just don't know how they'd still be wet after all these hours. Because by the time the autopsy has taken place, it's like days later. It's 3 days later. So I don't know if they'd still be wet from that. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. Unless it stayed wet because of the refrigeration that they had the bodies in. So it kept like the wet areas of the pants wet, I guess. But I still don't see how 3 days later the pants would be wet. But you know what? We're just going to leave that at that because, okay. Okay, here's the hands right here. Well, that's weird. Normally they put the hands being covered in paper bags in the initial observations, and this time it's down here in clothing and personal effects. A brown paper bag is secured over each hand by means of silver duct tape. Okay, I don't know why they put it in a different position, but all right. Jewelry includes a white metal ring with the blue stone on the ring third finger, what appears to be a black hair tie encircling the right wrist, interlocking white metal rings on the left thumb, and a white metal ring on the left index finger. External examination. The body is that of a well-developed, well-nourished adult, light-complected female who weighs 132 pounds as received, measures approximately 68 inches in length, and appears compatible with the reported age. The body has been refrigerated and is cool to the touch. Rigor mortis is receding in the muscles of the jaw and extremities. Fixed dark pink liver mortis is present over the posterior surfaces of the body, except in areas exposed to pressure. When first viewed, blood is dried within the hair and in rivulets and smears over the face, chest, and upper extremities. Head and neck. The scalp hair is blonde and brown, straight, and measures up to approximately 15 inches in length over the crown. Extensions have been applied to the hair and upper eyelashes. The irides appear hazel. The corneas are clouded. The ceria, is that how they pronounced it? No, I can't even remember. I think it was, because I was like, why is there no L? So ceria, conjunctivae, facial skin, or oral mucosa. The nose and ears are normally formed. The interior teeth are natural and in good condition. The neck is symmetrical without masses. The trachea is midline. The thorax is well developed and symmetrical. The abdomen is flat. The surface of the back is free of lesions. Lumbar lordosis is prominent. What the frick is that? Lumbar lordosis. I don't know what that means. Natural inward curve of the lower back. Okay. So her curvature in her back is naturally more prominent, I guess. The breasts are symmetrical without palpable masses. Genitalia is normal. Upper and lower extremities are well developed and symmetrical without absences of digits. Fingernails and toenails are short with smooth edges and patchy pink polish on all of the nails. Identifying marks include a small tattoo of wings on the posterior left upper arm. And then evidence of injury. Okay. Number 1, stab and incised wounds of the neck and head, 13. This is the first one. On the right parietal scalp above and in front of the right ear is an approximately 1 3/16 inch linear stab wound oriented from 7 to 2 o'clock. The 7 o'clock end is squared and the 2 o'clock end is sharp. Dark red abrasion is present at the wound edges, extending up to 1/8 inch from the interior and posterior wound edges. The wound track travels along the skull, involving the right parietal scalp, subcutaneous tissue, and right temporalis muscle. There is associated subscapular and temporalis muscle hemorrhage. Depth and direction is the wound track travels from the decedent's back to front and slightly downward to a depth of approximately 1 1/4 inches. Number 2, on the left parietal scalp above the left ear is an approximately 1/2 to 1/16 inch linear stab wound with irregular edges, oriented from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Both ends are sharp, irregular up to 1/8 of an inch. Red marginal abrasion is present, widest superiorly. The hemorrhagic wound track travels along the skull, involving the left parietal scalp, subcutaneous tissue, and left temporalis muscle. Associated findings. There is associated subscapular and temporalis muscle hemorrhage. I've got a lot of share requests for the folder, so I'm going to try to get some of those approved while I'm reading this. Oh my God, maybe not. Y'all might have to actually wait. Holy shit. There's like over 100 requests for the folder. So this is for the folder itself. Let me put the link in the chat since there's a shit ton of y'all in here. That links directly to the documents that we're reading. The only thing that should ever be requesting full-on permission, and I'm always going to grant it, I'm just like, I need to keep track of stuff, is the full folder. This one right here that houses everything should be the only thing that you should need to have permission for. When it comes to these records here, pull this up real quick. I'm going to share this folder here that has all the documents from the unsealed documents. I'll say that. Has all the unsealed documents that we've gotten so far for 2025. This one right here, you should not have to ask any permission to get into that one. So this is going to be anything that we've covered that's been unsealed from 2025, but it's also going to be especially everything that we've gotten here over the past few days in way of all the crazy ass information that we've been going over. Because again, I know that some of you can't access the Idaho Case of Interest website, which I'll also throw that link in here while I'm doing these. For those of you that actually can access it without a VPN, all of these are on there. We just realized that they like to remove things really quickly. So as soon as I saw Sarah post on Twitter, it was probably like a good hour or so after she posted it that I finally got on Twitter and I saw the notice that she posted there was some more of the documents that had come unsealed. So I ran over and I grabbed them all and put them in here because that first batch that they did that they removed, I had to get them from Sarah because they removed them so quickly. I didn't get the chance to get them all. I think I'd only actually grabbed like maybe 3 of them of all those expert disclosures that came out from like March or whatever. So now when they unseal stuff, I just go in and I grab it. And I just add them to the Google Drive. Eventually, they'll be everything moved over. All right, I'm going to have to take a break on answering some of these here in just a second. But it should, for what we're looking at right now, this should not ask you, it should not ask permission at all for the folder with the documents on it. Okay. So let's go back to this now. All right, where were we? Okay. Number 3. On the right forehead at the hairline is an approximately 5/16 to and 1/8 inch linear incised wound with undermining extending inferiorly, 1/16 inch red tan marginal abrasions at the superior edge of the wound, and a 1/8 inch linear incised tail extending inferiorly from the midpoint of the wound. Rectangular red-brown abrasions extend inferiorly and laterally from the inferior wound edges. The inferior edge of this abrasion shows fine striations. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissues of the forehead. No associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's right to left and downward to a depth of approximately 1/4 inch. Number 4 through 6. On the upper right cheek, extending from the right temporal fossa over the zygomatic arch of the right nares, is a wound complex consisting of at least 3 intersecting incised wounds, altogether measuring approximately 4 by 1 inch in greatest dimension. On her nose? On the upper right cheek, like towards the nose area. 4 inches? That's the whole width of your face. Undermining extends superiorly to the right lower eyelid. Like that's just big all the way around for the side of a face. 4 inches is big. My God. The wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and facial and paraorbital musculature. At the medial end of the wound track enters the nasal cavity. So it sounds like it's like this, I guess. Something like that. That's crazy big. That's wild. Blood is present in the right nostril. Purple ecchymosis is present at the superior margin of the wound. An approximately 1/2 to 1/8 inch pale tan abrasion is associated with the lateral end of the wound complex. The skin inferior to the wound shows an 1/8 of an inch diameter circular tan abrasion. The nasal septum is incised. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's front to back and upward to a depth of up to 1.5 inches. Number 7, entrance. On the lower right cheek, overlying the mandible, is an approximately 1 and up to 1/8 inch linear stab wound oriented from 10 to 4. The 10 o'clock end is square and the 4 o'clock end is sharp. A regular red abrasion is present at the margins of this wound, extending up to 3/8 of an inch from the 10 o'clock end of the wound. Pink ecchymosis is present at the wound edges. The wound track involves skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the right cheek entering the oral cavity. The oral mucosa and tongue are perforated. There is a moderate amount of hemorrhagic fluid within the oral cavity. The wound track travels from the decedent's right to left and upward. Depth cannot be accurately assessed due to the wound track entering the oral cavity. Number 8 through 9. On the right side of the chin is an approximately 3/4 to 1/16 inch linear incised wound with undermining extending inferiorly and medially. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue. The skin medial and superior to this wound shows an approximately 1 1/4 times 1/16 of an inch linear superficial incised wound. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and downward to a depth of approximately 1/4 inch. On the upper left cheek is an approximately 1/2 to 1/16 inch, 1/2 times 1/16 inch curvilinear incest wound with undermining extending medially. Purple ecchymosis surrounds this wound, extending up to approximately 5/8 of an inch from the lateral wound edge. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and paraorbital musculature with no associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's left to right and upward to a depth of approximately 3/8 of an inch. Number 11. On the left mid cheek is an approximately 1/8 of an inch linear stab wound oriented from 11 to 7. Both ends are sharp. Purple ecchymosis is presented at the 7 o'clock end. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the left cheek entering the oral cavity. The oral mucosa and tongue are perforated. There is a moderate amount of hemorrhagic fluid within the oral cavity. The wound track travels from the decedent's left to right. Depth cannot be accurately assessed due to the wound track entering the oral cavity. So a lot of these wounds are going straight into the mouth area. On the interior neck, okay, are these them? Okay, so these are the ones that, this is one of the wounds that the two guys are saying matches Kaylee's. On the interior neck are 2 parallel linear incised wounds with somewhat irregular edges, each measuring approximately 5 inches in length and up to 1 1/8 inches wide. Okay. So on Kaylee's, it said Kaylee's were about 4 inches and about 1 inch wide. On Maddie, they're 5 inches in length and 1 1/8 of an inch wide. So bigger, worse, bigger wounds on Maddie, but the same, all the way to the irregular edges, because that's what Kaylee's also said. The minimally hemorrhagic wound tracks involve the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and superficial musculature of the neck with no associated findings. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's front to back up to a depth of approximately 3/4 of an inch. Stab wounds of the torso. Entrance. On the lateral left upper chest, just below the left clavicle, so like down here, is a gaping approximately 3/4 by 3/16 of an inch linear stab wound oriented from 10 to 4. The 10 o'clock end is sharp and the 4 o'clock end is squared. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue of the left chest, the left subclavian artery and vein, and the parietal pleura. Associated findings. There are approximately 100 milliliters of blood and blood clot within the left chest cavity. That's the same that Kaylee's was. 1,000 milliliters. It's the same. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 2 inches. Number 2, on the medial left upper chest, just left to midline, is an approximately 1 1/4 to 3/16 inch lineal stab wound oriented from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. The 9 o'clock end is sharp and the 3 o'clock end is square. Purple ecchymosis surrounds this wound. Rectangular pink-red abrasion extends superiorly from the superior wound margin. Fine striations are visible within this abrasion. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue of the left chest, musculature, and vessels of the first intercostal space and left lung apex. The upper lobe of the left lung show focal parenchymal hematoma. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 2 inches. Number 3 and 4. On the upper left breast, so like up in here, up here, are 2 gaping linear stab wounds measuring approximately 1.5 by 1/2 inch inferior and 2 by 7/8 of an inch superior. The inferior wound is oriented from 10 to 4, and the superior wound is oriented from 11 to 5. The 10 and 11 ends are sharp, and the 4 to 5 ends are squared. Okay, the hemorrhagic wounds tracks converge, involving the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the left chest, the second and third intercostal spaces anteriorly, the upper and lower lobes of the left lung, the inferior pericardial sac, and the fourth intercostal space posteriorly. The second rib is fractured anteriorly. The left lung lobes are perforated anteriorly and posteriorly. That's a crazy word to say, with associated parenchymal hematoma. The intercostal vessels are disrupted. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's front to back and downward to a depth of approximately 8 inches. Oh. On the lower right chest is an approximately 2 by 5/16 inch linear stab wound oriented from 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock. The 2 o'clock end is squared and the 8 o'clock end is sharp. There is a focal dark purple ecchymosis at the 2 o'clock end of the wound. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue of the chest, the right second intercostal space, third rib and third intercostal space, the lower lobe of the right lung, and the right diaphragmatic leaflet and the liver. There are approximately 300 milliliters of blood and blood clot within the right chest cavity. The right lung shows associated parenchymal hematoma. The liver shows an approximately 2.5 by 3.5 inch wound track. Damn. All the way through to the freaking liver, bro. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back, left to right, and downward to a depth of approximately 7.5 freaking inches. That is insane. Incised wounds of upper extremities. On the lateral deltoid region of the left arm is an angled 2 3/4 by 1/2 inch incised wound with undermining extending I'm so tired of all these vowels. Posteriorly. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the left shoulder. No associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's left to right and front to back to a depth of up to 1.25 inches. Number 2, on the anterior deltoid region of the left arm is a gaping angled incised wound measuring approximately, holy shit, that's like the entire width of her entire arm. Where is this? Okay. So the anterior deltoid is this muscle right here that goes at like an angle over your shoulder. And it says that there was a 4-inch long cut right here. Like in this one muscle was like 4 inches. 4 by 1.5 inches in greatest dimension, with undermining extending posteriorly and a superficial 1/2 inch incised tail extending laterally from the lateral wound edge. Like, she was tiny, bro. Think about this in like Maddie's body frame. Like, that's wild. Like, you have to. Like, that's big. That is big. My gosh. The wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the left shoulder. No associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and slightly upward. So does that mean that they're saying the cut came from like this? Instead of like this, they think that it went this way? Okay, number 3. On the dorsal left forearm is a linear half by 1/4 inch incised wound with irregular edges, purple contusion at the margins, and 1/8 inch superficial incised tail extending medially. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue of the dorsal forearm. No associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's back to front to a depth of approximately 1/4 inch. Number 4, entrance on the ventral left forearm is an angled 2 times up to 1/2 inch incised wound with a 1/8 of an inch superficial incised tail extending medially. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue of the ventral forearm with no associated findings. The wound track travels from the descendant's front to back to a depth of approximately 3/16 of an inch. On the dorsal left hand, at the base of the middle finger, so at the base of the middle finger, is a 1/2 by 1/8 inch incised wound with irregular edges and red marginal abrasions extending up to 1/16 of an inch from the wound edges at the inferior aspect. The wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and interserosus muscles. On the dorsomedial hand is a crusted linear 1/2 inch yellow abrasion. The wound track travels from the decedent's back to front to a depth of approximately 3/8 of an inch. 6 through 10. On the palmar aspect of the left hand, at the base of the left thumb, is a 2 by 3/16 inch linear incised wound. The wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue of the left palm. So, like down here, then, in this area, then. 4 superficial linear incised wounds are present on the central palm, ranging in length from 1/4 inch to 1 inch. So over here on this side. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 1/8 of an inch. Shirt worn by the decedent shows defects corresponding with the stab wounds of the torso. Based on characteristics of the least distorted wounds, the findings are consistent with the blade approximately. This is the same thing as all of them. Okay, let's see. I don't want to read every little thing if everything else is normal. Normal thickness, 1,400 gram brain, no epidural, subdural, or subarachnoid hemorrhage. Cerebral hemispheres are symmetrical. Cranial nerves and blood vessels at the base of the brain are free from abnormality. No lesions of the cortex, no with the white matter, deep nuclei. There's no gross evidence of hemorrhages, infection, or mass lesion. No focal lesions. Pituitary gland normally positioned. The neck is dissected in layers, showing normal anatomic relation. The neck musculature shows injuries as described above. The hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage are intact. Palpation and manipulation reveal no fractures. Cervical spine shows normal alignment. No evidence of obstruction or edema. The epiglottis is normal. The tongue is normally formed, but perforated. The heart weighs 230 grams. Yeah, everything else seems pretty like normal according to this. No significant atherosclerosis. The vena cava and their major tributaries are normally distributed and are free of gross abnormalities. The right and left lungs weigh 330 and 180 grams respectively. Upper and lower airways contain serosanguineous fluid. The mucosal surfaces are smooth and yellow tan. Light pink, free of masses. Liver weighs 1,000 grams. Okay, so down into the gastric mucosa is arranged in the usual rugal folds. The lumen contains a moderate amount of thick green-brown fluid. A moderate amount of thick green-brown fluid and partially digested food fragments. The stomach courses to the small bowel in the usual fashion. What the frick could she have drinking that was a thick green-brown fluid? Thick green-brown fluid. The mucosal and serosal surfaces of the small and large bowels are unremarkable. The appendix is present and grossly unremarkable. Everything normal. She also had what seemed to be an IUD. No gross evidence of pregnancy. Breast tissue is all normal. Pituitary gland is normal. Thyroid gland is of normal position, size, and texture. Yeah. And we know that T-shaped device is the IUD. Yeah. And then we know the results were just alcohol. Yeah. Okay. All right, now we're going to Xana's. Oh, wait. Huh. So Maddie's shoulder wound, it didn't say. Well, let me go back to what it said. Yeah. So where's these matching signature shoulder injuries? Because I know that, like, this is saying that she has this, like, 4. Is this the one where it says, like, she has, like, this 4-inch wound right here? Where's it at? So this is the lateral left upper chest. Upper chest. Upper left breast. Lower right chest. Am I missing something? Like, okay, so right here, it says that there's 2 parallel linear incise wounds on the neck. So this is the ones from here, but where's the ones from the shoulder? Because for Kaylee, this one right here was like 4 inches. This is the one that we talked about. Okay, so on the lateral left upper chest is a gaping hole. On the medial left upper chest is 1 wound. Okay, so right here on the upper left breast are 2 gaping linear stab wounds. Lower right chest is then this one switches over. Then we have the extremities. Lateral deltoid region on left arm is 1 cut. The big one right here on this side is just 1 cut. The dorsal left forearm is just 1 cut. The ventral left forearm, again, is just 1 cut. Dorsal left hand, 1 wound. I don't see the one they're saying like matches on the left shoulder. So here's the ones for Kaylee's neck right here. Okay. So then let's also go down back to Maddie's. All right, where'd the one go for her neck now? I know that they have two gaping situations right here on the upper left breast, but that's not the same as the left shoulder. But hold on, I want to just highlight where the neck wound is. Where did it go? Did we, like, where the frick did it go? Here it is. Okay. 12 and 13. Okay. So go back up to Kaylee's so we can grab the one that matches the 2, or the one that has the 2 to the left. Okay, let's see. That's the scalp. 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 It's the forehead, eyebrow, central forehead, medial forehead, right temple, tip of the nose, upper right lip, left cheek. There's a cluster. Okay, so this one's interesting. Where did it just go? Why did I go to hit my highlighter and the whole damn thing went away? Hold on. I don't know why it just did that. Okay. I hit to change the highlighter color and the whole thing went away. Go back to where I was. Okay, there's the right lip one. Okay. Okay, right here. So this one shows possible, because it shows there's 2 distinct linear defects inside the tissue. And he said something about you really couldn't see it until the body was moved. So we'll keep that there. And then right here too, extending from the upper left chest over the interior left shoulder are 2 parallel curvilinear incised wounds. So this might be for Kaylee. Okay, so then Maddie's would be the boys are warming something up. Okay, this is still the face, right side of the chin, upper left cheek. See, this is the one for the neck. Okay, so lateral left upper chest, just below left clavicle, is a gaping stab wound. 1 stab wound. So it's not number 1. On the medial left upper chest, left of the midline. Singular stab wound. So it's not this one either. And then right here on the upper left breast are 2 linear stab wounds. This one's on the right, so it wouldn't be this because he said they were both on the left. And the one on this piece, is this one right here? No. Hold on. This is just one wound right here. For this one that's 4 inches, it's still just 1 incision. 1 incision. This goes down to the forearm. This one's the forearm. This one's the left hand. This one goes down into the palm. Yeah. I'm not seeing anything that they could consider parallel, precise wounds here, literally at all. This one right here that has 2 gaping linear stab wounds right above the left breast is the closest to matching that I can tell. That's the closest to 2 wounds on the left side towards the same-ish area of the body, but these definitely do not sound like they're exactly the same. Definitely far from being called some sort of signature. Definitely far from being some sort of signature. Yeah. I don't see it being a signature. Okay. Everything else I think is just normal stuff. No spine, rib, or limb fractures are identified. I thought they said one of her ribs was messed up earlier in the report. And then, yeah, they just found the alcohol. Didn't it say that her rib was messed up? Oh, that's Xana's. Hold on. Yeah. Right here. On page 7, it says the second rib is fractured anteriorly. So then why are they saying at the end of the report that there were no rib fractures? Because that's not true. That's not true. Okay, now we're on to Xana's. This is the last one. This is where we should see something about some sort of stomach contents. So we'll see. Multiple sharp force injuries, abrasions, and contusions of head, torso, and extremities. Investigative reports indicate that this is a 20-year-old female. Xana Kernodle was found deceased at her shared home. 3 other occupants of the home were also found deceased. Post-mortem examination showed a well-developed adult female with stab and incised wounds of the scalp, face, and neck, 23, stab wounds of the chest, 7, and abdomen, 4, incised and puncture wounds of the back, 3, incised wounds of the upper extremities, 25, and incised wounds of the lower extremities, 5. Associated injuries included punctures of the outer table of the skull, perforations of the jugular vein, heart, lung, and pulmonary blood vessels, hemorrhage of the chest cavities, and wounds extending into the bones of the hand. Additional injuries included scrapes and bruises on the face, torso, and extremities. There is no evidence of natural disease that would have caused or contributed to death. Postmortem toxicology testing showed a blood alcohol concentration of 0.229 and an amphetamine level of 12 nanograms per milliliter, which we've already gone through those calculations. Okay, a 20-year-old female was found deceased at her shared home. 3 other occupants of the home were also found deceased. The Latell County Coroner's Office requested an autopsy to further investigate the death. The body is found supine in a body bag sealed by tag number 0773077. The name Xana Kernodle and the tag number are written on a piece of blue tape affixed to the outside of the body bag. Xana has been crossed out and Xana has been written below. A piece of green tape bears the medico-legal case number and a notation indicating the body has been x-rayed. 2 identification bands encircle the right ankle, 1 bearing the decedent's name, dates of birth and death, and tag number, and the other bearing the decedent's first name and last initial. The body is received clad in a blue long-sleeve pullover sweatshirt. It was gray. It's dark, like a dark gray, and a pair of tan thong-style underpants. The clothing is blood-stained. A brown paper bag is secured over each hand and the left foot by means of silver duct tape. I don't understand the left foot. I don't understand the left foot. Why not both feet? Why just the one foot? I don't understand. I don't think we ever found anything out about why. There is no jewelry on the body. A plastic lid with adherent orange and yellow material is found in the body bag. A plastic lid with adherent orange and yellow material is found in the body bag. What the frick is that for? What is that for? The body is that of a well-developed, well-nourished, adult, light-complected female who weighs 150 pounds as received, measures approximately 67 inches in length, and appears compatible with the reported age. The body has been refrigerated and is cool to the touch. Rigor mortis is receding in the muscles of the jaw and extremities. Minimally evident fixed dark pink liver mortis is present over the posterior surfaces of the body, except in areas exposed to pressure. When first viewed, blood is dried within the hair and in droplets, rivulets, and smears over the body surfaces more prominent anteriorly. The scalp hair is dark brown, wavy, and measures up to approximately 24 inches in length over the crown. The irides appear brown, the corneas are clouded, the scleria are white, and the conjunctivi are clouded. No petechial hemorrhages are identified on the scleria, conjunctivi, facial skin, or oral mucosa. The nose and ears are normally formed. The interior teeth are natural and in good condition. The neck is symmetrical without masses. The trachea is midline. The thorax is well developed and symmetrical. The abdomen is flat. The surface of the back is free of lesions, except for injuries in the to be described below. The breasts are symmetrical and genitalia is normal. Upper and lower extremities are well developed and symmetrical without absence of digits. The fingernails are short and neatly trimmed. The toenails are short with smooth edges and patchy pink polish on all of the nails. No identifying marks or scars are readily apparent. The first one from the stab and incised wounds of the head and the neck. On the superior frontoparietal scalp, just right of midline is an approximately 3/4 by 1/8 inch linear incised wound with 1/16 to 1/8 inch dark red marginal abrasion and a 1/8 inch superficial incised tail extending interiorly from the anterior end of the wound. The posterior end of the wound is angled. The wound track involves the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, glia, and outer table of the skull. There is associated subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage. The outer table of the skull shows an approximately 9/16 inch linear defect. The wound track travels downward to a depth of approximately 3/8 of an inch. On the right posterior parietal scalp is an approximately 1 1/8 inch linear incised wound with undermining extending medially in an irregular round edge laterally and a 1/2 inch superficial incised tail extending anterolaterally from the anterolateral end of the wound. An approximately 1 by 1/8 inch rectangular abrasion extends at an angle from the lateral wound edge. Fine striations can be seen within this abrasion. The wound track travels along the skull involving the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, glia, and outer table of the skull. There is associated subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage. The outer table of the skull shows an approximately 1/8 by 3/16 inch, roughly triangular defect. The subjacent brain shows focal subarachnoid hemorrhage, depth and direction. The wound track travels from the decedent's left to right and downward to a depth of approximately 5 inches. On the right temporoparital, Jesus Christ, scalp above the right ear is an approximately 1 by 1/4 inch gaping linear incised wound with undermining extending inferiorly, a 1/2 by 1/4 inch triangular dark brown abrasion at the superior aspect of the wound, and a dark brown marginal abrasion along the inferior aspect of the wound. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, glia, and right temporalis muscle. There is associated scapular, subgaleal, and temporalis muscle hemorrhage. The wound track travels downward to a depth of approximately 3/4 of an inch. On the left posterior parietal scalp is an approximately 2 by 1/8 of an inch curvilinear incised wound with irregular round wound edges, undermining, extending interiorly, and discontinuous dark brown red marginal abrasion. Dark brown, dark red marginal abrasion. The wound track involves the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, glia, and outer table of the skull. There is associated subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage. The outer table of the skull shows a discontinuous superficial linear defect subjacent and slightly anterior to this wound. The wound track travels from the decedent's back to front and downward to a depth of approximately 1/2 an inch. 5 through 6. At the vertex, just left of midline, in a wound complex consisting of at least 2 intersecting linear incised wounds ranging from 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch in length and up to 1/8 inch in width, with 1/16 to 1/8 inch dark red-brown marginal abrasion and undermining extending medially. The wound track involves the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, and glia. There is associated subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage. The subjacent brain shows focal subarachnoid hemorrhage. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's left to right and downward to a depth of approximately 1/2 an inch. 7 through 9. On the left anterior parietal scalp is a set of at least 3 lineal incised wounds ranging from 3/4 to 1 3/4 inches in length and up to 3/8 of an inch in width. These wounds show 1/16 to 1/4 inch dark red and dark brown marginal abrasion, as well as dark brown abrasion spanning the skin between the wound edges. The wound tracks involve the scalp, subcutaneous tissue, glia, and outer table of the skull. There is associated subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage. The outer table of the skull shows a cluster of linear and curvilinear defects. The wound tracks travel downward to a depth of approximately 1/2 an inch. On the central forehead is a wound complex consisting of at least 3 intersecting linear and curvilinear incised wounds ranging from 1 inch to 1.5 inches in length and up to 5/16 of an inch in width. The skin at the intersection of these wounds shows dark brown abrasion and blue-gray contusion. Wound tracks involve the skin, subcutaneous tissue, glia, and outer table of the skull. There is associated subcutaneous and subgaleal hemorrhage. The outer table of the skull shows 2 linear half-inch defects. Depth and direction. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and upward to a depth of approximately 1/2 inch. Check my kid. Okay. On the left forearm is an approximately 1/2 to 1/8 inch linear stab wound oriented from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. The 10 o'clock end is squared and the 4 o'clock end is sharp. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, glia, and outer table of the skull. There is associated subcutaneous and subgaleal hemorrhage. The outer table of the skull shows approximately 1/8 to 1/4 inch, roughly triangular defect. That's like said quite a few times here. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 3/4 of an inch. Number 14. On the glabella, medial to the left eyebrow, is an approximately 1/2 to 1/8 of an inch linear stab wound oriented from 12 to 6. The 12 o'clock end is squared and the 6 o'clock end is sharp. There is approximately 1/16 by 1/8 inch rectangular abrasion at the superior aspect. The wound tract involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, frontal bone, and frontal sinus. There is associated subcutaneous and subgaleal hemorrhage. The lungs show diffuse homeoaspiration pattern. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and slightly downward. Depth cannot be accurately assessed due to the wound track entering the sinus cavity. On the upper right cheek is an approximately 3/4 by 3/16 of an inch linear incised wound. The wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the face. There is associated subcutaneous and intramuscular hemorrhage. The skin superior to this wound shows an approximately 2-inch superficial linear incised wound extending from the temporal fossa to the periorbital skin. The wound track travels from the decedent's right to left, to a depth of approximately 3/8 of an inch. On the lower right cheek is an approximately 1 1/4 by 3/16 of an inch curvilinear stab wound with undermining extending anteriorly. The wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, musculature of the face, and oral cavity. There is associated subcutaneous and intramuscular hemorrhage. The adjacent oral mucosa is hemorrhagic. The wound track travels from the decedent's right to left and back to front. Depth cannot be accurately assessed due to the wound track entering the oral cavity. Number 17, extending laterally from the right side of the chin is a gaping approximately 3 by 1/4 inch curvilineal incised wound with discontinuous, so laterally from the right side of the chin. This is still this is 3 inches of a wound, in that area. That's crazy. That's really big for the face. The lateral end is angled and shows scalloped wound edges. A set of parallel linear yellow abrasions extend laterally and inferiorly from the lateral end of the wound, with individual injuries ranging from punctate to 1/8 of an inch and altogether occupying an area of approximately 1 1/8 of an inch. The minimally hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the face. The mandible is exposed at the base of this wound, so you can see her jawbone. The skin lateral to the wound shows an approximately 1/8 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch yellow abrasion. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back, right to left, and slightly downward to a depth of up to an inch. On the upper right neck is an approximately 1 by 3/16 of an inch linear stab wound oriented from 10 to 4. The 10 o'clock end is sharp and the 4 o'clock end is squared. An approximately 1 inch superficial yellow abrasion extends anteriorly and superiorly from the superior edge of the wound. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue of the neck, the right external jugular vein, and the superficial and deep musculature of the neck. There is moderate associated soft tissue. The external jugular vein is perforated. The wound track travels from the decedent's right to left and downward to a depth of approximately 1 1/4 inches. On the lower right neck is an approximately 9/16 by 3/16 inch linear stab wound oriented from 11 to 5. Both ends are sharp, like a double-edged weapon. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue, the superficial and deep musculature of the neck, and the right internal jugular vein. There is abundant associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The internal jugular vein is perforated. The wound track travels from the decedent's right to left and front to back to a depth of approximately 1 1/4 inches, 20 and 22. On the lower left cheek and upper left neck, so like this whole area, are at least 3 superficial linear incised wounds ranging from 3/4 to 1 inch in length and up to 1/16 inch in width. The wounds on the upper neck show associated yellow abrasion and purple contusion. The wound tracks involve the skin and superficial subcutaneous tissue. No associated findings. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's left to right to a depth of up to 1/16 of an inch. The right maxillary central incisor, tooth number 8 by the Universal Dental Numbering System, has been sharply divided medially. The wound tract involves the right maxillary central incisor. There is a superficial rectangular defect of the midline upper labia mucosa. The labial surface of the left maxillary central incisor, tooth 9 by the Universal Dental Numbering System, shows 2 incised defects. Wasn't it 7, 8, and 9 of Kaylee's too? And this is 8 and 9. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's right to left and back to front. Depths cannot be accurately assessed due to the wound tract entering the oral cavity. Stab and incised wounds of the torso, 14. 14. On the medial upper left chest is an approximately 3/4 by 3/16 of an inch lineal stab wound oriented from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. The 12 o'clock end is squared and the 6 o'clock end is sharp. The medial edge of the wound shows dark brown abrasion. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue, the anterior second intercostal space, the anterior pericardial sac and the left atrium of the heart, the posterior pericardial sac, and the posterior fifth intercostal space. The skin to the left of the wound shows an approximately 1.5 inch linear discontinuous superficial abrasion. There are approximately 100 milliliters of blood and blood clot within the pericardial sac and approximately 1,000 milliliters of blood within the left chest cavity. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back, right to left, and slightly downward to a depth of approximately 6 inches. On the medial upper right chest is an approximately 1/2 to 1/4 inch gaping stab wound oriented from 9 to 3. The 9 o'clock end is squared and shows a square. And what? The 9 o'clock end is squared and shows a square. 1/16 by 3/16 inch yellow abrasion, and the 3 o'clock end is sharp and shows focal 1/16 inch purple marginal contusion. The superior wound edge is somewhat irregular. Yellow tan 1/16 inch marginal abrasion is present at the inferior edge of the wound. 2 perpendicularly intersecting wound tracks underlined this one. The minimally hemorrhagic wound tracks involve skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the chest. 2 perpendicularly intersecting 3/4 inch linear defects are present in the anteromedial right second intercostal muscles. The mediastinal fat is hemorrhagic. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's front to back, right to left, and slightly upward to a depth of approximately 4 inches. Ooh. On the lateral right chest is a gaping approximately 2 1/4 by 1.5 inch curvilinear stab wounds oriented from 10 to 4. Both ends are rounded. The wound edges are somewhat irregular and shows discontinuous 1/16 inch yellow marginal abrasion. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, right lateral 5th intercostal space, middle lobe of the right lung, and right lung hilum. The right pulmonary artery and vein are perforated. There are approximately 500 milliliters of blood in the right chest cavity. The wound track travels from the descendant's front to back and right to left to a depth of approximately 7 inches. On the lower left chest is a gaping approximately 2 by 1 inch stab wound oriented from 12 to 6 with 1/8 of an inch red and tan marginal abrasion and an approximately 1 3/4 inch incised tail extending inferiorly from the 6 o'clock end of the wound. Both ends are rounded. At least 3 distinct linear defects are apparent on the underlying rib cage. The hemorrhagic wound tracks diverge. One track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue, the 5th intercostal space anteriorly, the anterior pericardial sac, the right ventricle of the heart, the posterior pericardial sac, and the left leaflet of the diaphragm. At least 2 wound tracks involve the skin, subcutaneous tissue, costal cartilage of the 5th and 6th ribs, and the diaphragm. There are approximately 100 milliliters of blood and blood clot within the pericardial sac and approximately 1,000 milliliters of blood within the left chest cavity. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and right to left to a depth of approximately 6 inches. On the medial right abdomen is an approximately 1/4 by 1 1/4 by 3/4 of an inch gaping stab wound oriented from 12 to 6. The 12 o'clock end is squared and the 6 o'clock end is rounded. The 2 edges show 1/16 to 1/8 inch tan marginal abrasion. At least 2 distinct linear defects are apparent on the underlying rib cage. So that's the second wound. Like 5 through 7 and 8 through 9 both have issues with the rib cage. Wound tracks converge involving the skin, subcutaneous tissue, musculature, the 7th intercostal space, and the costal cartilage at the 8th rib. There is moderate associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 3 inches. Now 10 through 11. On the lateral right abdomen is an approximately 1/4 inch by 9/16 of an inch gaping stab wound oriented from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Both ends are rounded. The wound edges are irregular and there is 1/16 to 1/8 inch tan marginal abrasions. Dark purple contusion is present at the 9 o'clock at the end of the world is the way that my brain just read that. At the 9 o'clock end of the wound. At least 2 distinct wound tracks are apparent in the underlying soft tissue. The wound tracks involve the skin, subcutaneous tissue, musculature, and ascending colon. Associated findings. There is moderate associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The serosa of the ascending colon shows linear defects. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's right to left and slightly front to back to a depth of approximately 3 inches. 12 through 13. On the upper right back are 2 gaping linear incised defects. The medial wound is horizontally oriented, measures approximately 2 by 3/4 inches, 3 inches when re-approximated, and shows an approximately 2.5 inch curvilinear incised tail extending medially from the medial end of the wound. The lateral wound is vertically oriented, measures approximately 2.5 by 1 inches, 3 inches when approximated, and shows undermining extending medially. The wound tracks involve the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the back. The wound tracks intersect in the subcutaneous tissue. The wound track travels from the decedent's back to front and right to left to a depth of up to 1.5 inches. Back to front. So in the back, there's a back wound that goes back to front. Back to front is like going up, isn't it? Like, because if you're on her back, the wound would be going like that way, right? Because front to back, you would think that you would hear, because it's like the knife would be going in more towards, like, let's say, more towards the shoulder, but then as the knife is going in, it's going down this way. So you'd think like back. I don't know, maybe I'm just not understanding that right, but that's how it seems to me. From back to front. To a depth of up to 1.5 inches. See, I just always kind of thought, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it would end up looking like that as the knife was coming back out of the skin. Because you have to kind of like go up with it a little bit, I guess. On the posterior left shoulder is an approximately 1/8 of an inch diameter circular puncture wound at the medial aspect of 1/2 by 1 1/8 inch rectangular red-brown abrasion. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue. The skin superior to the wound shows an approximately 3/4 by 1/4 inch elliptical red-brown abrasion. The wound track travels from the decedent's back to front and left to right to a depth of approximately 1/2 inch. Incised wounds of right upper extremities, 15. 15. 1. 2. No, on the anterior deltoid region of the right arm is a gaping 3¼ by 1 inch curvilinear incised wound with an approximately 1¼ inch superficial incised tail extending medially from the medial end of the wound. The wound edges show discontinuous 1/16 inch tan abrasion, more prominent at the inferior edge. The wound tract involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue medially and extends into the musculature laterally. The right shoulder joint capsule is focally exposed at the base of this wound. So you can see, just like Maddie's, wasn't it Maddie's? Maddie over here on this side, on the left, was cut so deep you could see the cap of the shoulder joint. And it looks like it's pretty much the same here. On the posterior upper right arm, just above the right elbow, I think these are the ones that we could see. So we know the pictures that came out January 20th, where Xana wasn't redacted and you can sort of see her. So you can see from like bottom of the elbow up, her face is off to the side and you can see her hair, the color of her sweater. She's covered in blood. But right above here, like right above the elbow on the right side, you can see these 2 holes in the gray sweater. And I think that this is the one. I think this is it right here that they're discussing. On the posterior upper right arm, just above the right elbow, is an approximately 1 1/8 inch linear incised wound with somewhat irregular edges. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue. The skin proximal to this wound shows approximately 1/2 to 3/8 of an inch semicircular superficial skin defect with surrounding yellow abrasion and an associated approximately 1/2 inch linear abrasion. The wound track travels from the decedent's back to front to a depth of approximately 1/2 inch. Number 3, at the inferior aspect of the right elbow is an approximately, I guess it could be this one. I'll have to look and see. The inferior aspect of the right elbow is an approximately 1 1/4 inch by 1/8 of an inch, 1/8, curvilinear incised wound with irregular edges and undermining extending superiorly. Wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissues. The right elbow joint, the right elbow joint capsule is focally exposed at the base of this wound. Oh my God. So where we can see her on the floor and it's got this injury, the right elbow joint is exposed because the cut is so deep you can see the bone. The wound track travels from the decedent's back to front and upward to a depth of approximately 3/4 of an inch. On the ventral right forearm is a gaping approximately 2 inch by 3/4 inch linear incised wound with a linear approximately 1/4 inch abraded yellowtail extending medially from the medial end of the wound. The minimally hemorrhagic wound tracks involve the skin and subcutaneous tissue. No associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 3/8 of an inch. Number 5. On the dorsal right forearm is a gaping approximately 1/4 by 1/2 inch branched incised wound with undermining extending inferiorly. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the forearm with no associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's back to front and downward to a depth of approximately 1/2 inch. On the lateral right wrist is an approximately 1 3/4 up to 1/4 inch linear incised wound. The minimally hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin laterally and medially and the skin and subcutaneous tissue centrally with no associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's right to left to a depth of up to approximately 1/8 of an inch. On the dorsal right hand are 2 gaping curvilinear incised wounds with irregular edges and undermining extending superiorly, measuring 3 inches and 2 1/4 inches in length and up to 2 inches in width on the hand. Your hand's only so many freaking inches wide, bro. But we also know that there's like severe injuries, but what I think it's to the left one, right? If I remember correctly, it was to the left hand. And right now we're on the right hand. There is moderate associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's back to front and upward to a depth of approximately 1.5 inches. 9 through 14. 6 linear and curvilinear incised wounds are present on the dorsal aspect of the digits of the right hand, 1 at the tip of the thumb, 2 on the dorsal index finger, 2 on the dorsal third finger, and 1 on the dorsal fourth finger. The wound tracks involve the skin and the subcutaneous tissue on the thumb. The wound track additionally involves the thumbnail and nail bed. The tip of the thumb is partially amputated. I thought we heard it was like something from the left hand. This is saying it's the tip of the right thumb being partially amputated. Okay. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's back to front up to a depth of approximately 1/4 inch. On the right palm is an approximately 3/4 by 3/16 of an inch serpentine incised wound with irregular edges. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and interosseous muscle of the hand. There is associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and slightly left to right to a depth of approximately 1/2 inch. Now, this is everything over on the left side. Incised wounds of left upper extremity, 10. So everything we just read was all on the right side of her body? Jesus, for frick's sakes. Okay. In the left antecubital fossa is a gaping approximately 2 by 1 inch, 2.5 inch when reapproximated, linear incised wound with an approximately 1 inch superficial incised tail extending superomedially from the medial end of the wound. The wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and the cephalic and medium cubital veins, including into the musculature of the proximal forearm at the inferior aspect. There is abundant associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back up to a depth of approximately 1 inch. Number 2, on the ventrolateral left forearm is an approximately 3/4 by 3/16 of an inch linear incised wound. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue with no associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and slightly left to right to a depth of approximately 1/2 of an inch. Number 3, on the ventral left forearm is an approximately 1.5 by 1/4 inch curvilineal incised wound with undermining extending superiorly and 1/16 inch tan marginal abrasion along the inferior wound edge. An approximately 1/4 inch contused and abraded tail extends laterally from the lateral end of this wound. Wound track involves skin and subcutaneous tissue with no associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and upward to a depth of approximately 1/4 of an inch. 4 to 5. On the dorsal left forearm is a gaping 2.5 by 1.5 inch wound complex consisting of at least 2 intersecting incised wounds. Red tan abrasion is present at the wound edges and the ends of the wounds. The hemorrhagic wound tracts involve the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and the musculature of the forearm. There is moderate associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The wound tracts travel from the decedent's back to front to a depth of 1 inch. It doesn't say right to left. I guess because it's a gaping hole. Which is also something that we know that idiots said a lot. Mabbit. That they were more like gouges. I mean, lots of them sound that way, but also like little things too, guys. Like, I'm really shocked to be reading a bunch of little 1/8 of an inch. My kid is so loud. I'm really surprised to be hearing things that are also extremely shallow. Like, a lot of these wounds are extremely shallow compared to like everything that we've been told. Several of them are crazy, but several of them are also like really tiny. 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch. Like, I'm going to end up going back because I said we're going to end up separating these out, right? So I'm not going to reread it. I'm going to leave in like me reading it the way that I'm reading it. Take out me talking, obviously, this kind of stuff. But I'm going to put in like pictures, diagrams of exactly like where the wounds are. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to do some comparisons to like how many were more than 1 inch. Not many. I mean, the ones that were bad are freaking horrible. But then it's like 2 inches, 1.5 inches, 1/8 of an inch, 9/16 of an inch. It's just very weird. For such a big blade, how can you possibly just only like cut someone 1/8 of an inch 1.5 million times? Like, it's very odd. Definitely more to like really look at. Right? And we're hearing 7.5 inches, 8 inches, 7 inches, but like for a handful, right? But is it really slashing? I don't even know if it's really slashing because some of these are literally like 1/2 inch long. It's almost just like death by 1,000 cuts. You know what I mean? Like that whole thing is like what it's reminding me of, like reading all these little bitty things. You know what I mean? Because it's like that on everyone, not just one person. It's like that on all of them. I just expected, especially knowing that they were fighting back, or even if they were just like putting their hands up and trying to, you know, defend things, I was still expecting it to be deeper, I guess is what I mean. Not so shallow. Like, especially if someone's fighting back against what you're doing to them, you definitely expect there to be deeper cuts. Unless they were deflecting so much they couldn't get very deep. I don't know, but there's just a lot of like really shallow type things. Okay. Foot focal red abrasion is present on the inferior wound edge at the medial end, within which can be seen delicate striations. The wound tracks involve the skin and subcutaneous tissue with no associated findings. The wound tracks travel from the decedent's back to front to a depth of up to 1/4 inch. See, just like little. 1/4 inch is like half of the width of your like fingernail. It's like little. At the base of the left thumb, extending into the web space, is a gaping 1 by 1 3/4 inch incised wound with irregular edges. The wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and interosseous muscles. There is abundant associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The wound track travels from the decedent's back to front to a depth of approximately 3/4 inch. Number 9. On the proximal left palm, okay, is an approximately 3 by 1/8 inch angled incised wound with irregular edges. So on the left hand was a whole 3-inch long wound, which is more like what I was expecting to see all over the place. But this is where the original information circles back about her left hand. Wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, palmar aponeurosis, interosseous muscles, and hamat and capitate bones of the hand. There is abundant associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The tendons and muscles of the hand are transected and the bones are incised. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back and slightly downward to a depth of up to 1 inch. That's big for your hand. That's big for your hand. On the mid left palm is an approximately 1/4 by 1/4 inch linear incised wounds. The tracks involve the skin, subcutaneous tissue, interosseous muscles of the hand. There is moderate associated soft tissue hemorrhage. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 1/2 inch. Okay. So now we have incised wounds of the lower extremities, 5. 1 through 2, overlying the right shin is an approximately 2-inch by up to 1/8 inch linear incised wound with an approximately 1/2 inch superficial incised tail extending superomedially from the medial end of the wound. The wound track involves the skin at each end and the skin and subcutaneous tissue centrally. The skin superior to this wound shows an approximately 1/2 inch superficial linear incised wound. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 1/4 inch. 3 and 4 on the posterolateral right calf. So both her and Ethan had wounds to their legs. On the posterolateral right calf is an approximately 2-inch by 1/4 inch curvilineal incised wound. The hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin anteriorly and the skin and subcutaneous tissues posteriorly. The skin anterior to this wound shows an approximately 1/16 inch superficial incised wound. The wound track travels from the decedent's right to left up to a depth of approximately 1/4 inch. Number 5. On the interior aspect of the left knee is an approximately 2 by 1/4 inch linear incised wound with an approximately 1/2 inch superficial incised tail extending superiorly from the superior end of the wound. The wound track involves the skin and subcutaneous tissue with no associated findings. The wound track travels from the decedent's front to back to a depth of approximately 1/2 inch. The sweatshirt worn by the decedent shows defects corresponding with the stab wounds of the torso and upper extremities. Based on the characteristics of the least distorted wounds, the findings are consistent with the blade. It's the same thing. And see right here? Just like in this one sentence are 3 different versions of a weapon. Double-edged, single-edged, and serrated. Just right here are 3 different versions. of these weapons. Blunt force injuries. On the right forehead is an approximately 1 by 1.5 inch area of purple contusion, at the lateral and inferior aspects of which are red-brown abrasions. The skin inferior to this, at the right eyebrow, shows an approximately 1/2 inch diameter, roughly circular blue contusion. On the lateral left cheek is an approximately 1.5 by 1/2 inch, irregular dark brown abrasion with surrounding purple contusion. Purple contusions overlie the left mandible and left side of the chin, measuring 3/4 of an inch and 1 inch in greatest dimension, respectively. There is focal upper labia mucosal hemorrhage. Thorax and abdomen. At an approximately 1/2 by 1/4 inch dark brown abrasion is present on the lateral left breast. An approximately 2 inch by 1 inch, roughly rectangular purple contusion overlies the lateral right buttock. A rectangular bruise on her butt cheek. At approximate extremities, an approximately 2 inch by 3/4 of an inch, roughly rectangular purple contusion is present on the dorsolateral right forearm. On the medial right forearm is irregular purple contusion interspersed with punctate and irregular red-tan abrasions, altogether occupying an area of approximately 3 by 1.5 inches, with individual abrasions measuring up to 1/4 of an inch in the greatest dimension. A circular 3/16 inch diameter purple contusion is present at the anterior right thigh. Okay. Irregular yellow abrasions and purple contusions overlie the anterior right knee, altogether occupying an area of approximately 2 inches by 1.5 inches, with individual injuries measuring up to 1 1/8 inch in greatest dimension. A circular, I guess we know why they covered up her left foot. A circular 1/8 inch diameter purple contusion is present at the base of the left great toe. Okay, so now we're getting into the internal examination. Reflection of the scalp and examination of the skull and brain reveal injuries as described above. Skull is of normal thickness. Brain weighs 1,310 grams. Cranial nerves and blood vessels at the base of the brain are free from abnormality. No focal lesions. Pituitary gland normal. Neck dissected in layers showing normal anatomic relations. Epiglottis is normal. The carotid vessels are intact. The tongue is normally formed. The hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage are intact. Heart weighs 220 grams. Everything here seems normal. Upon opening the chest cavity, the lungs are fully expanded and are anteriorly displaced by hemothoracis, more prominent on the left. The right and left lungs weigh 200 and 160 grams. All right, so here comes her stomach. Let's see. Right and left kidney weighs 100 grams each. Renal capsules are smooth and thin, semi-transparent, and strip with ease from the underlying smooth, pale tan, firm cortical surfaces. The cortices are of normal thickness and are sharply delineated from the medullary pyramids. The calyces, pelvises, and ureters are non-dilated and free of stones. The urinary bladder contains abundant clear yellow urine The mucosa is gray, tan, and smooth. The uterus, cervix, fallopian tubes, ovaries, and parts are without abnormality. The uterus contains a correctly positioned IUD. There's no freaking information in here about her food content. There's no information in here about her food content. Or is it up here? Okay, I was looking down here. Okay. Gastric mucosa is arranged in the usual rugal folds, and the lumen contained abundant partially digested food fragments. The stomach courses to the small bowel in the usual fashion. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So she had partially digested food fragments, the same as Maddie. So I guess that means that she ate something. For there to have been partially digested food fragments means that she had to have eaten something. But partially digested, like how long? Well, the stomach acids are going to continue to work even if your stomach muscles are no longer working. So, because the acid just doesn't suddenly just like not break shit down anymore just because your body dies. The acid still does acid things. You know what I mean? So even if she would have ate a handful of freaking curly fries and died 3 minutes later, it would still technically partially digest inside of her stomach acid. No, Ethan didn't have any food in his stomach. Yeah. Abundant, partially digested food fragments. I mean, yeah, that means that there's a lot. So she ate before she died. She ate before she died. Everything else seems normal. No gross evidence of pregnancy. So now people can put that one to rest too. I don't see anything else. Peripheral blood samples submitted to NMS labs. Toxicology reports are separate. Yeah. And then we know that they had done testing for the amphetamine and for blood alcohol. Okay. So it looks like that's it. And then this is her education stuff. Oh, man. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of information. I'm pretty sure Maddie is the only other one that had food in her stomach. Yeah, because Ethan said 100 milliliters of watery tan fluid without food or pill fragments. And then Kaylee's said a dark brown fluid and partially digested food. So Kaylee's had food. And then Maddie's was partially digested food fragments and thick green brown fluid. Does it say how much? It doesn't say how much of the food fragments.
in neither one of theirs. But Xana says an abundant, partially digested food fragments. I mean, if she was the only one eating and it was a small order, it probably wouldn't have taken very long to eat. I mean, honestly, my 17-year-old can put down any combo meal from any fast food restaurant in like 5 minutes if I don't pay attention to him. So at least that answers that there was food in her stomach, which I don't know why they couldn't have just answered that question all this time ago. That would have been lovely. Well, I'm glad that that's finally out. Like I said, I'll be going through and separating them out and doing it the way that I had done before for the other information that we had, and going in and doing like a diagram and putting all the specifics and the visuals in there. I'm just not going to reread it. I'm just going to take out all of the like the little spaces I stopped with my comments. I'll probably even like edit me off the screen and have like just the page on the screen, just so that I don't have to go back in and reread everything to be able to do it. That was a lot. That was a lot. Yeah, again, I was expecting big wounds, but I guess I'm just kind of surprised by all of the little small, shallow wounds. And again, I'm not seeing anything that could even be considered even remotely close to something matching when it comes to the left shoulder thing. Like one of them is way up here. The other one is like right above the left breast area. These two areas are so far from each other. And the one up here only had like one wound going across it. So like they had the matching underneath the neck, but they don't have what they were telling us about the left shoulder. Not that we can read in this report. So they're going to need to come out and kind of clarify what they said with that statement, because now we have the actual information that we can compare against what's being said. And there's already been several things that we've found to not be accurate. So, yeah. I wish the autopsy would have been, or I guess, shall I say, I wish the autopsy would have included like all of the debris and stuff like on their bodies, because I would have liked to have read something about there being something in Ethan's hand. Like, I know that this is just giving us like the way that they died and like all their wounds and stuff like that. But considering that, like, apparently the autopsy photos, not just the photos at the scene, but the photos from the autopsy, according to these people telling us all this stuff, include a picture of Ethan still with the stuff in his hand at the autopsy on the 16th. You know? So I don't know. So I guess that's it. Yeah. We still have to finish going over this damn book, because Cy Ray's book is the next one that we have to go over. There's just always a lot to do. I'm not even going to like tell y'all what I have planned anymore, because the plans never go to plan and stuff always gets like rescheduled or pushed back. So whatever's coming's coming. Just make sure your notification bells are on, because things just happen. Things just happen. And there's a lot we still have to go over. All right, let me see what I missed over here. I know I missed a lot of stuff because I was trying to just pay attention and read. Let's see, where did I miss? Oh, thank you for the 5 gifted memberships, Wasp. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for the 5, Lori. Thank you for the 5, Blondie. I appreciate that, guys. Thank you for joining, Angie. I appreciate that. Welcome, welcome. 10 gifted memberships from Joe Mom. I appreciate that. Thank you. Congratulations to those who ended up getting all these memberships. Thank you for the 5, Juliet. I'm confused. Am I losing it, or is the throat slit different from what Whitcomb said? Are they even horizontal? Didn't say left to right, and 4 inches is like a credit card. The neck wounds are the ones that seem to be the more accurate in way of what they were telling us, like I just said. Kaylee's was like 4 inches. Maddie's was like 5 inches. Kaylee's was like an inch wide. And Madison's was like 1.5 inches or something like that. Like Maddie's all the way around on her neck was wider and like longer than Kaylee's. But everything else was like, yeah, they even had like what did it say? Like irregular edges, irregular wound edges, something like that. Something like that. So those, I mean, matched close, but the stuff on the left shoulder, I'm definitely just not seeing it. 5 gifted memberships from Lori and 5 gifted memberships from Bianca. 5 more from Carrie. Holy crap. Raining memberships. I need like a It's Raining Men song, but like it's raining memberships. I would probably play that just to be funny every now and then. Welcome, Jamie. Thank you for joining on your own. Hey, Lisa. Coming in late. It's 5:30 a.m. in the UK, girl. We're just now closing out. We're just now closing out. I've been reading. I've been reading for 3 hours and 45 minutes. But we were really surprised to see these today. Really surprised to see these today. Like I said, we got a lot of documents that we went over last week in a live. We went through everything. There's definitely documents in that one from last week that need their own videos, their own deep dives into them. There's definitely information. Lots of information that came out in this set of information that dropped too. We are now in January of 2025. So I don't know for sure. You'd have to check, and I'm going to have to go run and check Sarah's post because she keeps track of which documents on the unsealing order are already out versus the titles that we're still waiting for. So I don't know if we have any more left from this 3rd order or if we're finally about to get the freaking 4th order. Can you believe it's a year in almost, and we are only just now getting the 3rd order of unreleased documents? A year. You know how long this shit's going to take? This is so stupid. And notice that like most of the stuff that we've gotten, like minus maybe 2 documents that we got today, like there's really nothing that needed to be redacted. Like at all. And the only reason I'm saying that for some of the stuff we got today is because there's like people's personal information on it, where they went to high school, if they collected Social Security or not, where they worked, shit like that, just because they're related to Kohberger. I could see that stuff needing to be redacted. But even that stuff was never given to us redacted. It was filed under seal and left in its pure form without any redactions and just like open to us today. It's so stupid. This is crazy. Crazy. All right, I'm going to jump off of here. I will see you guys tomorrow at some point during the daytime and again tomorrow evening. That's all I'm going to say. Like I said, I'm sick of trying to like plan things and then stuff just pops off. But we're going to have to go over the Chris Holland guy. I think that's his last name. That talked to the custody queens today because he's the other person that was apparently helping get information over to Whitcomb. And I want to see if he's full of shit too, or if he's knowledgeable, at least a little. I don't know. I only heard like little small bits and pieces. I don't know if he said anything crazy tonight or not. I guess we'll find out. I haven't decided if I'm going to go in and like just clip the pieces that he's talking about, or if we'll just do like a live going over the entire thing. I don't usually do that with these kinds of interviews. I normally go in and listen to the whole thing and then do like a review reaction. So that's what I'll probably do just to like save time. Plus I don't like watching other people's stuff like in a live review like this, like other people's, like other YouTubers on the, you know what I mean? I don't like doing it. So that's probably what we'll do. I'll figure it out eventually. I gotta get some sleep first. He's off. He's doing something. All right. I'm going to get off here. Thank you again so much for the super stickers and the super chats, the super thanks for those of you who joined on your own and gifted memberships. And I know that I'm getting notifications for some of you that are sending PayPals and Cash Apps and buy me a coffee things. I very much appreciate all of you guys, all of your support, you guys being here, caring about the truth and the facts, because I know it's not really me. Like, I know I get the information out and I'm passionate about it, but above all and everything else, y'all are here for Kaylee and Maddie and Xana and Ethan. And that's what so many of these guilters need to be paying attention to. I think that most of them are here for like anger. I think they like it. I think they like the animosity, and that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to figure out the hell's happening. What the hell's happening? What the hell actually happened? Why people are lying? Where the truth is? No matter what. No matter what. I just want to get to them. Can we get to some truth? Can we get to something? Because nothing that you're giving us is pointing to where you want us to think it does. Again, the evidence does not equal the narrative, and all we want it to do is equal each other. All we want it to do is to come together and make some sense. That's all we're asking. They deserve that. They deserve the facts. They deserve the truth. So we'll see. Maybe one day. But I'm going to go ahead and get off of here. You guys have a great night. Try to get some sleep. I know that this was really heavy. I did peek over a couple of times, and I saw quite a few people mention how this was going to be really heavy and it was going to be really, really hard to kind of like wind down. Just go watch some stupid shit. Go find the stupidest moron that you know of on TikTok and just scroll their entire last like 5 videos and just cleanse your brain. Watch Twilight. Go watch a show. Go do something. I told Slade I wanted to watch the Mummy series over again. So I'm going to go watch me some The Mummy Man before the new Mummy movie comes out. Because I got to catch up on my Mummy movies. I love those movies. So I'm going to go do that. Y'all go get some relaxation. Try to calm down. I know it was a lot. Thanks for the 2 Miller time. I appreciate that. Thank you. Y'all try to relax. I will see you guys tomorrow. Y'all try to have a decent, calm night. Don't let it get to you too bad. We've got a lot more to dig through. But that's it for right now, you guys. See y'all. If you like the way that I present this information and give my opinion, please don't forget to leave a like on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed already. And please don't forget to make sure that the notification bell is set to all so you don't miss any of my rants, reviews, reactions, updates, or deep dives.